Okay, welcome all to the Merrimack Village District Board of Commissioners meeting. Today is July 18th. And I will reconvene the meeting from a previous, we had previously opened the meeting and went into and out of non-public. So I'm reconvening the public meeting at 5:02 p.m. And at this time, I'd like to rise and conduct the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. So we've got 4 board members here. Commissioner Paul. I'm drawing a blank. Lovely. Haven't seen him in a while. That's why I'm forgetting his name. He's been excused for tonight's meeting. So we don't need to go to a roll call because all the quorum, 4 of us are here in the room. So the first thing on the agenda is a public hearing for the rate increase for the water rates. And so we will recess the public hearing. Do we need a motion to do that officially, or I don't think we do we? All right, so does someone want to make a motion to recess the public meeting and open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. All right, motion by Wolf, second by John. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I declare the public hearing relative to the Merrimack Village District proposed rate increase for fiscal year 22-23 open for comments. The public hearing notice was posted on the Merrimack Village District website at www.mvdwater.org, at the town hall and at the public library and post office. The purpose of the hearing is to allow comments from the public in relation to the proposed rate increase. When all comments have been received, I will close the public hearing. The board will return to regular session to complete the remaining agenda items. Are there any questions about this procedure? At this time, I will take comments regarding the proposed rate increase. Are there further comments? I don't see anybody from the public here. I do want to mention that this meeting is being offered by webinar, and you can join this webinar by going and clicking on a link on the agenda for today's meeting. And that agenda is on the mvdwater.org website, or you can call 646-876-9923 and enter webinar ID 891-7680-65-6252. And as a courtesy, Merrimack TV is recording this meeting and will be posted on their website at a later date. So we had left off with asking if there were any comments. I don't see anybody from the public on the web page on the Zoom link here, so I think I don't see any questions. Anybody from the press? Therefore, seeing no further comments, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Board of Commissioners will now reopen the session of the Merrimack Village District Board of Commissioners meeting. Do we want to have Underwood discuss? Well, that's what I was thinking. Any of the yeah, I didn't know there was anybody that we were going to pause to hear any discussion on this or not, but Keith, do you have something maybe really quick that you want to present on the rates? Just a little summary.
Yeah, I can just give a quick recap, but what you have in front of you is an 11% rate increase across the board, both in the consumption and the demand charges, and the tiered rate structure will go up 11% as well. And the purpose for the 11% is not inconsistent with what was laid out in 2017, 2018. If that's the time frame, I think it is when the $14.5 million warrant articles were passed for your treatment facilities.
Right.
And so at that time, we had projected about a 79% overall rate increase to afford to support what we believed you needed for your budget increases, as well as the debt and operating costs for the facilities. This 11% increase will get you close to that. You're still under it. We expect one more rate increase will be needed to fully fund once the debt service and operation costs are in place for all the facilities. But we think we're fairly on target with that 80%. There's been some things that overall, I should say, you've already done a bunch of them. So we think you need about 24% more to finish it off, 11% now. And then next year we'll reassess the final costs and make the final rate adjustments necessary. Some things have gone up, like everyday operating costs in your budget, probably higher than we projected. Your consumption has actually dropped, maybe to some degree because of maybe the tiered rate structure or COVID, we don't know, but that actually dropped sales. We got a little bit more grant than we thought initially. So there's been some pluses and minuses. They all kind of canceled and balanced out. But we recommended 11% take effect immediately, and then we'd reassess next year for the final adjustment. So that's kind of a recap of what you're voting on, but this time it's 11%.
So you basically summarized this in your July 13th letter to MVD.
Yes. And in there is sample bills and the revised rates in a rate sheet as well.
Right. I just had a couple questions on that letter, just minor things. You refer to that you would use the following information to revise the rate model. One of them was updated meter counts. What is that referring to? Is that the number of connections, or is that, I didn't specifically know what that meant. Yeah.
The model actually accounts for every connection you have, whether it's residential or commercial or industrial, and by size. So that accounts for the revenue. And you've had a lot of increase in accounts. You've had a lot of new accounts and new connections. So we've adjusted for that.
Okay, good. And then it mentions, it includes about $540,000 for PFAS loan. And then his parentheses in here, no principal forgiveness was assumed, and up to 50% loan forgiveness may be granted if the state reaches any settlements in their PFAS litigation. I'm kind of ad-libbing here. It's not quote unquote, but so I know you've excluded the forgiveness in the analysis because that's conservative, and I agree with that. I was just wondering, has DES provided you with an indication of that 50%, or is that an assumption?
It's just in the statute that when they issue the grants, that if they ever get successful in any further lawsuits and the money comes back to the state, they will give back to the communities up to 50%. So it's just stating the statute. Okay. It's not, there's no promises made or no commitments.
Right. All right. That's what I was wondering. Okay. Thanks. All right. Anybody have any questions on the material that Keith presented?
Good.
All right, good. So I guess we can reconvene the regular meeting. Did we already do that? I can't remember if we did.
Well,
yeah, because I closed the public hearing. So we're all right. So we can move on now to the first item on the agenda, which is the capital improvement plan. That was also prepared by Underwood Engineers. And that is further down in the packet.
And I can give a little brief overview on what Ron, Brian, and Underwood did, if you'd like.
Sure.
Does everybody find it?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. You guys have it? It's in the further on in the packet.
This is the same format that the district's been using for a while. It is published in your annual report. The planning board does like to get a review on it. We're a little bit ahead of the usual schedule because I think Ron's getting pressure from the planning board to get it in sooner than later, which is fine. Most of the recommendations are based on the master plan and the asset management plans. And it's informed by what you're going to be seeing soon in that the water supply update study, and as well as the cost of service study. So the recommendations that are coming out of that report are reflected in here. So you're sort of seeing the executive summary of what came out of the water supply update. We expect you to get that report, and it's not much. It's going to be cost tables, cost updates, and a brief tech memo. You'll see that in a couple of weeks, if not sooner. But the top tiered projects, the top 6 or 7 projects, most of those come from that. The 2 biggest ones in the capital plan are the Mitchell Woods and the artificial recharge at 4.5, and those cost numbers are updated. You see, typically and historically, the district has liked to put a little bit more planning a year or 2 ahead of time, just to make sure the study numbers, which are still somewhat conceptual, are in better shape. So when you go to a warrant article to support a capital project, it's better informed. So you see a $50,000 preliminary engineering a couple years prior to each of those big capital numbers. The other one that's in here that's pretty significant is the Pentachuck wholesale agreement. And we've been talking with you about that. I think that's the 4th or 5th line down. And initially we had some we thought there'd be some capital associated with that. There really isn't, for a couple of reasons. One, our ask from them is low enough. And the second, to not require some capital project items. And also Milford has reportedly looked to take less water than Pentachuck originally thought. So that makes the infrastructure that they have suitable to get our ask, which we're targeting around 500,000 gallons a day or 250,000 gallons a day. So that's in the capital plan, but there's really no capital associated with it. But it's in there because it's one of the recommendations coming out of our water supply master plan update. The other projects that are sort of either ongoing or completed, the treatment plants, the SCADA and GIS and IT improvements, they're identified here. And then a lot of the ones below are more like maintenance items to your existing assets. Some tank projects, some recoating and blasting is needed up at Parker Drive. Updated quotes are needed on that, but we got a placeholder for $500,000. We have some other items for cleaning and inspection on the other tanks. We have identified them there. And the one big one down here that you'll want to know about, I think it's later on your agenda, but we did put in water main extensions related to PFAS. And we have a placeholder there for $1.5 million. And then there's some equipment identified, just some rate work. There's some equipment identified, and then there's some coordination items with the town. What we've tried to do as best we could is every capital item or every item on here has a source of revenue that we're targeting. It's not, it's not a given, but if it's big enough, we identified it as bonds. If it's reasonable, or if it's medium level, we talk about taking it out of capital reserves. And some of the items we even show as a budget item, and you can see how those line up on the bottom part of the capital plan. And even if there's some grants associated with it, like the $1.5 million PFAS extension project, we show below as a offset by $1.5 million in grant. Well, it should be. It's actually on the wrong row. You have to move that one down. But this is still draft for your review, and but that's where Ron, Bryan, and Underwood landed on the first cut with it.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions that I had about that the grant line, that there was no values in there. So I knew we got grants. There should be some values in there. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, that the $1.5 million for the PFAS extension should be, it's not a bond. It's going to go down one row to grant.
Right. And I guess you had mentioned also you're updating or providing an addendum on the source alternative evaluation, the unit costs, so we're going to know what the cost per gallon per day is for I think we had about 9 different alternatives we were looking at.
Right.
So I would say the CIP that we're looking at here, which has artificial recharge and Mitchell Woods included with specific dates is probably, the CIP is probably tentative because that may be subject to change depending on if we decide to pursue different source alternatives than what's shown here. I mean, you know, looking at $7 million for artificial recharge, I'm not sure if that's the best, you know, spending of $7 million for the amount of additional water we're getting there. Maybe it is, but that's an evaluation we still need to kind of look at. So I think if we need to have something for the planning board meeting, then this is fine, but I don't want to connotate that this is like locked in stone, you know, which I don't think anybody realizes it would be.
No, it's not.
It's not, that's usually stated at the meeting as well, and it's a working document. I mean,
All right.
it's,
I just kind of wanted to make sure, you know, the viewing audience out there is aware of this and whatnot.
So
Yeah.
do we have to be that concrete, or can we call this a water production volume increasing measure and put a dollar value behind that? And then we put possible alternative examples underneath. Would that be maybe a better approach?
You
So the
could,
line item in itself basically is becoming more generic, right? It
Mhm.
only outlines that we want to add additional water production capacity. And then we
Yeah.
list underneath the alternatives we have right now on the radar.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. In fact, Wolf, if you look at last year's, that was one of the ways it was done. It said, you know, new well location, blah, 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 to be determined. It was vague.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so we can look to do that.
You
And
call it like a new source capacity increase or something like that.
Yeah. And in that regard, isn't the timing a little bit late? 2024 for a $50,000 study and 2026 for implementation.
You know,
Aren't
if you,
we planning to be much more aggressive with that?
well, you got to remember the 500,000 that we're looking for was a 20-year number. So if we get Pentachuck in place immediately, then you've got that commitment and you've got all your new sources. We just need to go back and dust off how all the new wells being online will keep you whole. And I think they do, but to your point, you know, we could talk about being a little bit more aggressive, but I think you have the time now that all your wells are back online and we have
That's a good point,
Pentachuck.
because we've been without wells for like most of the times in the last 6 years, kind of, right? Haven't we? We haven't had all of our wells on
Right.
most of that time.
But we also don't want to wait until it's too late.
No.
And the public perception is already it's too late today, right? So
Yeah,
not that it necessarily is, but
well, they don't understand the odd even
I know that-
irrigation ban.
I
either.
know.
And that's not going away with this either.
Oh,
Yeah.
If you wanted to move one up, I mean, Pentachuck, I think should be pursued immediately, but if you know, Mitchell Woods may be the one you'd want to be a little bit more aggressive, because to your point, artificial recharge probably will take a little bit closer look at whether that value is worth it. I think Ron, when he did it, he thought he would want to sort of get beyond these projects, FY 2023, plan in 2024, and then target a warrant article. You could do it a year after that, but we initially targeted 2.
Do we think 9's gonna be online is that gonna affect the whole thing? I mean, we're gonna have more production than we thought because of that one?
That's kind of still up in the air depending on what it's approved for, I think, right?
Yeah.
If they approve what we're asking for, then I think we will have a little more production than we had from well 3. Because we're going to abandon well 3 and replace it with well 9. But until that's like officially approved by DES, I don't know that we can count on it, you know?
I don't know if Peter, I don't know if he's there or, but he might have a better date on it than I do.
well, Jamie is gonna give an update on the well 9 stuff.
Yeah, that's right. You got him up next.
I thought that was only coming into service like the end of the year, like.
October.
I'm here, yeah, I'm listening, sorry.
Yeah, I thought the treatment plant was gonna start with well 2, but then well 9 was gonna be delayed because there was something delaying it. What is it, a VFD?
Yeah,
or what?
the VFDs were gonna be coming in
December or something. isn't it?
December, but right now they're looking at going online on December, I think 14th was their date that they had in the last meeting that we just had last week. So they, we have, so they're roughly going to be about the same time frame, at least right now. And I don't know what, that he seemed, that is the contract, he seemed pretty leery about his delivery date of that BFD in December. And actually, he corrected us at the meeting. That was the ship date of December, not the delivery. So,
Yeah. So I don't know, do we want to advance? Well, I guess we just talked about before, combining these new source related individual items into one general new source of increase item. So I guess the question is, do we want to shift the year that new source item comes into play? And I don't know how we would add a value to that without really knowing what new source option that would be.
Well, I like the idea. What I can do is what I still like is that it ties to the plan that you're going to get, the water supply master plan, your update, you're going to get those dollars come right out of there. But what I can do is word it to be goals or targets and put them in the sequence of recommendations out of the water supply report, which is Pentachuck first, Mitchell Woods second, and artificial recharge third. And I can use words, to Wolf's point, that just say, target artificial recharge at wells 4 or 5 or similar, or something like that. So we're not locked in. This isn't locking you in anyway, but using the words, at least people know that it's not.
Yes, I guess rethinking this, I wouldn't be opposed to listing out some of those individual projects, just making the reader understand that we're certainly not talking about implementing all of them.
Right.
It's one or more of these, which is kind of hard to specify which one we're selecting at this point because we haven't made those decisions. So then I'm not really sure,
So we would budget for, if we just, obviously we're looking at going into the Pentachuck agreement, so that'd be the 2024. And we do the, by then we'd have the matrix all set up with the different costs for the better costs for the additional water sources. We can do some engineering there within 2024. I think we could bump them ahead to 25.
I was thinking the same thing, actually. Just because I think you're right. We probably want to get moving on this more than waiting.
Take that into
We can always delay it.
consideration of design and implementation. One would probably drop off anyways. We're not, like you said, we're not going to do both or
Right.
pushed out further. But we probably should move them into 2025 just so that they're.
Yeah.
Well, this thing is part of the databases for the rate study, right?
Right. Yep.
So we can always delay an increase. We can always delay a project, but it's going to be hard for us to pull it in if we don't take the appropriate measure in the rate studies ahead of time. That's kind of where I'm coming from, right? So it's better to put it off if we don't need it, right? And then just delay the next rate increase, right? Because we have a healthy surplus and we don't need to, right? Than to get caught with a underwear hanging low. Shouldn't be saying that in a public meeting, but I mean, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I'm coming from. So I would definitely move it up a year each.
Which one? Both or both?
probably,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And if you wanted to list all of them with the respective cost, one way that I've seen this done is to put the most expensive item as the actual, item considered in the cost projections, and all the other ones are redundant ones. So you put out the worst case scenario basically, and the other ones are just fallback solutions. Maybe.
Yeah, that's fine. I wouldn't object to that, as long as, you know, I think the idea of knowing, the reader knowing that we still need to pick one or maybe two of those, however we need to get the water that we're looking for. And I know we discussed previously about the Pentachuck wholesale agreement, maybe getting into an agreement for, what was the minimum, 3 years, I think they said?
Yeah.
And that would sort of get us through the interim period before we, you know, would raise and appropriate, design, build whatever permanent solution. And then maybe after 3 years with the Pentachuck agreement would lapse and we wouldn't need it anymore. We may not need it to begin with. I don't know. We got to kind of, it kind of depends also on what well 9 is approved for.
Yeah.
And we might not know that for, you know, still some months ahead. So there's a lot of moving parts on this thing, but I guess that's my point of just, you know, making people understand that this is like tentative, and especially the planning board, if you're going to do a presentation to them, I think that's an important thing to discuss. So, so are you clear enough on that, Keith? Maybe to,
The only thing I maybe want to make sure I understand specifically is I will do some wording to make it sort of generic and show the projects, but maybe not identify that they're specifically going to be done. But right now we show $11 million, give or take there, based on the 2 projects. Are we still okay showing $11 million? Because I thought I heard maybe somebody said use the most expensive one.
yeah.
I'm still trying to tie it to our water supply master plan, which talks about both these. The other thing that the artificial recharge, remember, it does too, is it positions you for the future. It's not necessarily just about the additional water we might get out of 4-5 today, but it also gets you that pipe into the river that someday may be of benefit to you. So that was partly why that project, which doesn't give you any, you know, other than the recharge, gives you any more water other than related to that. But now you have a pipe in the river, you have an intake. So that was a long-term view thing. So my preference would be to show, I can do generically how you guys are talking about them, but I would still show them both as 11 million, and because it ties with the master plan study.
I personally like to individually list it out just so that we can see them. And if it's something that's not going to happen, it would actually just drop off. So
We dropped one off from last year, Ron and I. It was a Wilson Hill was in there. It wasn't specifically listed as Wilson Hill, but it said new well source. We took that dropped out. So there was one. If you go last year, you'll see one of these things that we thought we were going to do, we're not doing. So it's okay.
Oh, just go ahead. Did you say something?
No, I just was
Thought I
kind of agreeing
interrupted.
with what he said.
Oh, all right.
I said, okay.
The only thing that concerns me is someone reading this is going to say, oh, well, MVD is going to have to raise $12 billion in 2026 or 2025. And that's kind of like your idea, maybe
Well-
just using the most expensive one,
We add them all and put an asterisk, I can never pronounce it, word,
asterisk.
star next to it. And just make it clear that some of them might be redundant or falling off the radar, right? So, sorry, I'm having a hard time talking today.
Yeah, that would be fine by me too. I just don't want someone to read this thing and say, oh my God, you know, we're going to need to raise $12 million, or if we add them all up together, it's probably going to be $30 million in 2025.
Sorry, we'll just
That's
have
not the case.
We'll set them straight. It'll be
Yeah.
fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That's right. Facebook's gonna fix it.
I will make that asterisk. I'll put a footnote or an asterisk that says all the supply projects may not be needed.
All right. When were you expected to go to the planning board?
I don't have a date on that yet. So they're looking to get these by the end of July. And then
All right.
I don't know when they're looking to do interviews. I don't know if it's going to be the same time period again or earlier, but
All right.
So just hate me for that comment, but almost all of these columns, the numbers are centered. Which makes them, and some of them are like, you know, on the right,
Justified.
justified, thank you. So just for appearance, Would be nice to have that cleaned up. And I don't know about you, but I'm not sure if the planning board would have any idea what a COS is.
Oh, yeah,
EWW COS. So I would take out all those abbreviations.
cost of service. The other
That's
one
right.
too is about, I don't know, 9-10 lines down. It says number 7/8 inspection and cleaning. Probably want to put wells 7 and 8 cleaning. Because
Okay.
like Wolf's saying, there's gonna be people reading this that are not intimate with MVD lingo.
Yeah. Where does it say cost of service? COS?
Down under completed projects, the last item.
Oh, down there. Okay. Yep. Yep.
Honestly,
And do you like it justified right or centered, Wolf? Because I would probably go justified right unless you had a preference.
I would too, but it's more about consistency.
Consistency. Yeah.
Look at
Okay.
professional.
I'll go justified right.
our CIP is set up different than the towns as far as we list a lot more information out. So they would actually prefer less on this than there is.
Yeah.
Get what you ask for.
Well, I mean, I view it, it's our document. It's something that we should be comfortable working with. In there, we can explain it to them, they're viewing it, but it's something that's our working document. So,
Yeah,
but
that's a good point. All right, any other questions or are we good to move on?
We'll revise that and get it back to you, Ron. So you can get it to the planning board. And I think that's it for me. I'll stick around for 5 or 10 minutes, but I got another meeting I got to jump on to. So if you see me bow out, that's what that's for. But Peter will be here for the later items, the Underwood later items.
Keith, do you think you're gonna have that source alternatives addendum for the next meeting in
Yeah.
August?
That's what we intend to do. So I think you'll see it in the next 2 weeks and then we can discuss it at that meeting.
All right, good. Sounds good, thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, great. So we'll move on to the item number 2. And we're right on the money, 5:35. We'll get that. We're even a minute early. We'll see what we can do about that.
That's pretty good. You'll have us out here at 5:45.
So we're going to be talking about the town's water maintenance and salt use policy with Kyle Fox, and Lori is here from the Public Works Department. So go ahead and let us.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for having us this evening. Thank you, Ron, for your support and conversations in this. So, yeah, joining me is Lori Barrett. She's our operations manager for the Highway Division and Equipment Maintenance Division of Public Works, and the Director of Public Works. So we wanted to meet with you folks tonight as stakeholders for our obviously for our soil use policy, and to you folks and other stakeholders such as the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and others prior to meeting with the Town Council on our proposed policy update. The policy was last updated in 1984, so it's certainly due. And this is our first attempt at sharing with others what we're proposing. And what we'll do is we'll take any comments from the stakeholders and we'll just compile them in some sort of document, and we'll put it as backup for the Town Council to see as they deliberate on what they want to do with the policy. So the policy itself is quite short. The package you have is a number of pages, but the policy itself is just 4 pages. And that's intentional. We want it to be sleek, slim, easy to interpret, and easy to follow. And what the policy does is it informs our procedures. So the rest of the document is our winter maintenance procedures that's developed from the policy. The policy is what the Town Council will be approving. The procedures are meant to be kind of a living document that we change as we need if we get more or less employees, more or less equipment, technology changes, we can incorporate all of that into our procedures following the policy.
Right. And you and I discussed another example would be, we have a pending well 9 in front of
Correct.
DES.
Yeah, that was a great
And that might affect the wellhead protection area, so we might have to go back and add or delete roads from the boundary.
Right,
So it's
exactly.
kind of like a living document, the procedure document.
Yeah,
And I don't think the commissioners didn't get the procedure in their packet, but I think we were emailed that
I did.
before. Yeah.
76 pages.
So you guys, you did get an email. I don't know if you had a chance to review any of it, but I just want to make you aware that you do have that in case you're looking in the packet. It's not there, but you do have it on email. So sorry, go ahead.
no worries. So if you don't mind, I'll go through the policy itself, which a big part of it is influenced by the village district and the water supply in town. We certainly recognize that. I think if you guys in Dover is what we've heard, the 2 communities in New Hampshire that get their entire water supply from wells,
Mhm.
no surface water contributions. So we recognize the importance of getting this right. And certainly we were influenced by what we think you guys want. So I'll just run through it and then we can get into any more details that you like.
Sure.
So the objective of our policy is to provide efficient, environmentally responsible and cost-effective winter maintenance, snow removal, and ice control on roadways, sidewalks, and municipal parking lots for the towns, residents, businesses, and general public. Our procedure is kind of the objective stated above will be achieved by implementation and execution of the procedures and tasks outlined in the town of Merrimack's winter maintenance and salt use procedures. So again, the policy references the procedure document. Due to the many variables that are inherent in weather, each storm and or weather event may require different effort and or emphasis on any number of maintenance tasks, which together determine the overall winter maintenance, snow removal, and ice control strategy. I don't want to read the whole document to you. Level of service commentary. Obviously, it's impossible to maintain snow and ice-free roads during the storm, although that's often a desire by folks. It's not a level we can obtain. And so we put that right in the policy. We want to be upfront about that. Moving to page 2, it's the town's policy to start to conduct snow removal operations upon accumulations of 2 inches of snowfall. And this next sentence is really important. Removal of snow shall always be by mechanical means when practical before implementing chemical use. Many years ago, there was a kind of procedure of if it was a storm less than 2 inches, the town would burn it off. We don't do that. If it's 2 inches of snow or more, or if it's only a half an inch, we're out there with plows down. We're not burning anything off because of the environmental concerns. So that's one of the most important sentences in this whole policy. And we followed that for many, many years.
And that's good to know, because a lot of people have wondered why with just an inch or so of snow, why the plows are out, but that's why. And that's
Yeah, and we've heard a lot of people scoff at that and say that's a waste of money. You know, many years ago, blades were just made of regular steel and they wore out quick and we go through a lot. But now we've got the carbide blades and they last, you know, a good long time. We
nice.
definitely get our value out of it.
Great.
Staffing is determined by the operations manager, Laurie, in this case. Sidewalk clearance is conducted as soon as practical after winter storms. A lot of people don't know that we only have one shift at Highway. We have 18 employees who plow and we have 18 routes. So if everyone is in, every route is covered and we plow until the work is done. After that, then we start sidewalks. We just don't have the personnel to be doing both at the same time. The next big important area of the policy for you guys in particular is the low salt or the salt-free areas. And what we wanted to do when Laura and I were talking about this is craft the policy in a way that was easy to understand and adaptable. If any of you looked at the old policy from '84, it listed a bunch of roads that were no salt roads. And it all pertained to the wellhead protection area, but it didn't really say that. And of course, as roads have been added since 1984 that are in the wellhead protection area, they're not covered by the policy, even though obviously that's the intent and we do it anyway. So we wanted it to be flexible for changes to wellhead protection areas, adding new wells, subtracting wells, and adding roads. So the way we did it, we kind of started at the most restrictive, which is no salt routes. So no salt routes are going to consist of gravel roads, because we would never put salt on gravel roads because it would just make mud. And subdivision roads within the wellhead protection area. And that's all 3 wellhead protection areas. And if you get the well up by Mitchell Woods, we'd have a 4th, presumably, wellhead protection area. Limited salt routes would be collector arterial roads within the wellhead protection area. And that's a safety item. You know, we need to balance the environmental side and the safety side. And you think of roads like Natticook Road, which is right through the heart of the wellhead protection area, or Continental Boulevard. If we didn't use salt on those roads at all, it'd be virtually impassable. So that's kind of a need and kind of balancing the safety versus environmental side of things. Also, any other subdivision roads without access to public water are considered limited salt routes. That's because we don't want to, you know, if somebody has an old well that's close to the roadway, we wouldn't want to impact that by utilizing too much salt there. And finally, all other roads, least restrictive, would be potential salt routes. And that's not to say we use salt on every storm. Every storm is different. And if it's like a light fluffy snow that's not sticking to the pavement at all, we wouldn't use salt at all. No salt roads would be treated with aggregates, abrasives, or non-chloride based chemicals. Again, we wanted this to be flexible for the future. Right now, we don't utilize non-chloride based chemicals, but if there was a need to, this policy would allow it. Limited salt routes may be treated with aggregates, abrasives, non-chloride based chemicals, or chloride based chemicals at an application rate up to 50% of normal application rates. So flipping to the procedures real quick. We flip just a couple pages ahead, you'll see a chart that looks like this. I don't know where the camera is. That kind of gives us our guideline for how much salt we use per lane mile. And depending on the temperature, the type of precipitation, it's all kind of programmed in. And our trucks are all capable of programming that number in, whether it's 200 pounds per lane mile, 300, 400. And each storm, the foreman will kind of look at this chart and say, here's what this storm is looking like. The temperature is falling. It's 25 to 30 degrees and falling. It's snow. So we're going to plow and apply chemical. And it's just a kind of a matrix to tell us how to do our job the best, depending on the storm. So for a limited route, so for a regular salt route in that scenario, it says to use 250 pounds per lane mile. In a limited salt route, we'd use up to 125. So half or less. Under execution, policy outlined above is intended to inform the standing operating procedures for winter maintenance, snow removal, and ice control for the town of Merrimack. One or more of the following may delay or prevent implementation of this policy. Equipment breakdown, snow accumulation, excess of an inch per hour, extreme weather conditions, freezing rain, icing. We all remember that freak ice storm last winter where everything just instantly froze at about 9:05 in the morning. That's a case where we would have to use salt even on subdivision roads. You think of Wasserman Heights and other hilly roads, you know, we needed to treat those because safety apparatus and residents couldn't travel those. So our crew was scrambling on that one.
So there's always like an inherent emergency exclusion
Correct.
type of situation, no matter where you're talking about. Basically,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Traffic congestion is another one. Emergencies, personnel shortages. Think of COVID. We've been lucky so far. We had a couple scares, you know, last winter in our highway crew. Again, we have no backups. If we have mass employees out, we're going to struggle. So right-of-way obstructions and other events beyond the reasonable control of the town. I won't bore you with mailboxes or damage to private property. I'm sure that'll be a hot topic at the council level. But, so that's kind of the policy in a nutshell. What we're hoping to get from the commissioners is comments that, like I said, we can compile and present to the town council so they can consider each of our stakeholders' goals and needs as they finalize a policy for the town. Kind of weighing all sides. I would be happy to answer any questions you have or speak a little more on anything you'd like us to.
Sure. Anybody have any questions off the top of your head for Kyle, Laura, anybody?
I have questions, but I mean, I think the fact that we're moving away from well 3 because of this very issue is telling and something that you could pass along in your discussions.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's what John's talking about is the reason we pursued well 9 is we didn't think it would make sense to spend the financial commitment at well 3 for iron and manganese treatment before we treated for PFAS. So because it had elevated fluoride in it, and, you know, we could have spent this investment on the treatment for well 3. If the sodium and chloride, we've been graphing, you've seen the graphs at the salt committee meetings, it's just like, you know, going up endlessly. And we're trying to bend that curve and bring it back down. But we were looking at that and said, this just is too risky to put this amount of money towards treating well 3. So it panned out well 9 looks like it's a better well than well 3 quality and quantity wise. So hopefully that's going to persist and pan out that way. But yeah, that's an important, that's kind of what kind of raised the whole awareness of the situation, and the salt committee forming the salt mitigation committee was because of that severe, the impacts to well 3. And it's not, certainly I'm not blaming the town at all on that. It's
No, I was just trying to give an example.
Yeah,
of why we would be in support of this type of policy.
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, and it's a great comment and it's a fair comment. And I think the mitigation committee is such a great idea. And that's why we've been, I think, at every meeting.
Yeah,
We're
right.
certainly supporters of it. Because, you know, kind of what I read early on, this is town roads, town parking lots, and town sidewalks. Outside of that, we have no control. Certainly well 3 is an area where you have a lot of big parking lots and you have the state.
Yep, exactly.
Continental Boulevard, our section of it has been a no-salt route for a long time. And although, as I mentioned, we do use a little bit to keep the snow from bonding to the pavement. We don't use near as much as the state. And you can see that Jill knows back in 2011, I think we worked with John Hanson at DOT, and they did a pilot project for that winter. And they had message boards out there. And really that winter, they lowered their salt use. And their stretch of Continental looked much more like our stretch of Continental. And I don't think there were a lot of complaints. Why they didn't continue with that, I couldn't answer. I suspect it has to do with personnel levels.
Right.
Complaints and certainly as personnel levels go down, one of the ways to compensate for that is to use more material. Because you come back less often. There's less employees to get there by mechanical means. Certainly an issue the state is facing with being able to hire like all of us. But in past years when hiring was at better levels, they've still been cutting staff. And it's a real challenge to meet the demands of the public during the winter season when you don't have enough employees.
I appreciate you mentioning the, the distinction there because when I was looking back, I think back in 1984, there were more roads in the wellhead protection area that were listed as no salt. And with this policy, what we're doing is we're taking out like the main travel roads, like you said, like you mentioned, Continental and Natticook, which have a lot more traffic on them than the subdivision roads. So some of those roads that were previously no salt are now going to limited salt. But you would mention that because of the emergency situations that occur, the safety level is a little bit higher on those main roads. Although some of those are changing from no salt to limited salt, I guess maybe I'm asking, how much do you think the application is it going to actually change from what's already happening out there significantly? Because from our perspective, it kind of goes against what MVD wants to see. I mean, if we had our druthers, we'd like to see no salt over all the roads in the wellhead protection areas, but obviously for safety purposes, that's probably not a realistic, demand, right? So, but part of that balance is trading off. So I guess that was one of my questions is some of the previous policy and some of the roads like Continental, Natticook, the arterial collector roads that were previously no salt are now going to be limited salt. But in the past, when you factor in, like you said, some of the emergencies that you have to put salt on, even the no salt routes, just wondering how, and I don't know if you have an opinion how that's going to play out. I'm hoping it'll play out as well as it's been done in the past, that we don't really see much of a change there. It's not like we didn't see completely no salt on the no salt routes, because there were times where you had to apply salt on the no salt routes. And obviously you weren't over applying them because there were no salt routes. So it'd be nice to see if they were a limited salt route, that we'd still be applying the same amount of salt as we sort of were to begin with, I guess, I wouldn't want to see more salt being applied because of the no salt roads going to limited salt route. So is that a fair statement, do you think, that,
The fair statement is that the level of service that you've seen in the past is similar to what you'd see if this policy were adopted.
All right, that's kind of where I was getting at. Yeah. So I kind of like to hear.
Because of the practical need for the safety side of things. The old policy also had that escape clause that, we can use salt even
Right.
when necessary for emergencies, and every winter storm is an emergency.
Right. Right.
To some level. So the answer is, the use will not increase based on this policy. It's
Okay.
similar to what we already do.
Good. That's good to know. And I was kind of reading the list of streets, looking back on a map and trying to make sense of where. So it definitely helps to understand all the main collector roads are limited salt and all the subdivision roads are no salt within the wellhead protection areas. So it just made me wonder if we had a map that showed actually by demarcation which roads are limited salt, which roads are no salt. And Ron actually drew up some maps. I don't think anybody can see, but they're right there behind And basically what you did is just colored the arterial roads in one color and then all of the secondary roads in a different color. So my question is, in the plow drivers that go out and do their routes, the routes are not necessarily divided between no salt and limited salt and full salt routes. How do they know when they switch over into an area that they need to change from limited salt to full salt or vice versa?
Yeah.
How's that sort of implemented, I guess?
Yes.
So each plow driver is assigned an area within the zone. Zones are split to 3. And usually they're in the same zone each storm, unless we have a shortage and we need to cover. But they work as a team. They become very familiar with their area. And they know, they get these booklets with the maps, and they become familiar with the lists that are behind them. And this will tell you, color coded, which roads are low salt, no salt, or salt. And we do this training every year. We have a winter kickoff meeting. We make sure that we review the routes with drivers, with the zone groups, any questions, concerns. We make sure that we train them all on this before they go out. So normally it is the same operator in the zones every time the snow comes. So they're very familiar with what.
So they primarily have their own dedicated route that they're used to and they're familiar with. Yeah. And as long as they show up, and hopefully you don't need to swap around personnel, and
Not often.
but it's manual, right? When you switch from a full salt road, if it all of a sudden crosses into a limited salt road, it's a switch they make in the truck, right?
They dial it right on.
They dial it right on there, right? So this is going to dovetail well with an initiative that we're creating, which is going to be to post aquifer protection signs, which are going to piggyback with, limited salt and no salt signs. So that would also be an indication, a visual reminder to the driver. And I know we worked a lot with Jamie. I see he's got his hand up over there. Sorry, I don't know how long you've been waiting to speak, Jamie, but
It's okay.
maybe now is a good time to segue you in if you want to chime in.
Yeah, so I think appreciate Kyle, your presentation. I think this is great. And one of the things I'm curious about, and what they do in Dover pretty well, is they measure the amount of salt they use in each route, each storm, so that there's an ability to monitor and determine, yes, we are using less salt at the end of the season than we used the year before. And so I guess one question is there a way for you to measure the tonnage of salt that you actually put in that we can keep track of? Number one. Number two, are you GPSing the trucks so they know, so you're kind of keeping track of their routes? And then 3, this is for the commissioners. It seems to me that we might consider, I know we've decided on a sign, but it may make sense for us to put a no salt or at least a reminder to the driver that in certain areas, this is a no salt region. And that also it acknowledges to anybody else who might be driving that area that this is a no salt region. So maybe we adjust some of those signs that some say low salt, no salt for the areas that we're going to be putting in it. Because we're ordering, I don't know, Kyle, if you know this, but we're ordering 100 signs, I think, and probably ordering them this week so that they can be put in these routes. And then the last thing I wanted to ask, or it's not the last, but I'm wondering if there's any input that we could, as the commissioners, on the maps. I'm not saying you could do this, but if we had certain routes that we thought were highly sensitive, could we put that into the mix that said these roads, particularly within the wellhead protection area, if you could reduce salt even further than the limited salt, this would be very advantageous to the overall salt load for this well. So that would be something we'd send to you and say, hey, these are 5 roads that we're really concerned about.
Okay, I'll see if I can remember all of those. So number one, yes, Lori does keep track of how much salt we use on each road. I will say that it's highly variable from year to year. And from storm to storm, because of the type of precipitation we get. Unfortunately, the last number of years, we seem to be getting more and more icy kind of storms. The best storm for us is a straight snowstorm. We get out there, we may put some pre-treat down to keep it from bonding to the pavement, again, depending on precipitation type and temperature. And I should have mentioned that before. One of our key philosophies is anti-icing, not de-icing.
Right.
All we try and do is prevent that bond to the pavement so that we can remove the precipitation by mechanical means, rather than trying to melt it later. You use so much more salt trying to melt snow and ice than you do preventing it from sticking. So with the icy and slushy kind of storms we get, those are the kind of storms that force us to actually treat as we're plowing. Normally our procedure is pre-treat, plow, post-treat, go home. During these icy storms that we've been getting the last at least 2 years for sure, require us to put a lot more salt out. So although it can be useful to keep track of it, the year-to-year comparisons are not always that valuable. But yes, we can track it.
And at the end of the day, just not to go, none of this helps if we don't reduce the salt load, because we're still going the wrong direction. So, I get it and I appreciate that. I know what's going on in Dover is they just do a lot of brine application, an enormous amount of, pre-treating, like you said, anti-icing. And that has really helped their process. Did you guys get pre-brine trucks or?
We have the capability to do liquid on all our 6 wheels.
Okay, great. Okay. Sorry, Kyle, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sure, no worries. Regarding vehicle location, we do have AVL on all of our trucks. Lori did do a pilot program with DES probably 5 years ago, where we put computers into a couple of trucks that were supposed to give us information on how much salt we were putting out. The idea was to make sure our plows didn't double cover, and we didn't get a lot of value out of it, and we ended up not going forward with the program. One, it was very expensive to get those computers, and we just didn't get the value out of it because of our operations, because we have 18 routes, 18 drivers, and each person has their own area. We have very little overlap just by the nature of our procedures. So we didn't see the value of that program. But we do have AVL on all the trucks, vehicle location. And Lori and the foreman do monitor that to make sure things aren't getting double covered. And again, it's an issue we deal with pre-season in our employee training. They know when to do the routes and when to take actions. We've got a great group of folks. They're truly professional operators, and so they know what they're doing. Number 3 was the
Sign, just talking about the sign.
yeah. So Ron and I and Lori have had a lot of discussion about the signs, and it is our intention to piggyback on your grant program and put up new salt and limited salt signs associated with the new policy. So once you guys get your signs up, which I think we may be involved with, our plan is to piggyback and put our own limited salt and no salt use signs on those
Right, that'd be
posts. And I think, I talked with Ron, with Don in detail the other day about it. I think it's going to be a really great message for the public. Take Front Street, for example. For years, we got comments about, well, why is Front Street so terrible? Particularly when Parker Village was built and their roads were black. Why are you guys so bad at your job? And I think having the wellhead protection sign will really
Right.
fill in that story for people.
Right.
This is why. This is why it's a no salt route or a limited salt route. Because this is your wellhead, this is your drinking water. And I think it will really work together nicely to give everyone the information they need. It won't stop the
Point the
complaints.
finger at MVD.
Right. No. That's certainly not the
I'm
intention.
just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, it's their drinking water.
Sure, yeah.
I would
it's
think they'd be invested.
Public awareness,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Uh,
And it also tells the driver, hey, slow down. This is a no salt area. Your roads aren't gonna be, you can't do 40 miles an hour in a 30-mile zone anymore, you know?
Right. Yep,
Right.
exactly. And then I think number 4 was about the maps or about suggesting roads that in particular
Mhm.
you would
Right.
like to be no salt. And I guess my answer to that would be, put that in your comments to the town council.
Yeah.
That's the exact kind of feedback we're hoping you guys will give.
I know we were talking about Continental before and that being a no salt route. When you look at the map, I mean, Continental is very close to 2 of the biggest production wells we're gonna have, 2 and 9. I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, those provide maybe half our water or something around there. So,
Right.
and what concerns me is it's in the same watershed as where the elevated salt in well 3. Because well 3, 2, and 9 are all in the same aquifer. And well 3 is up gradient. So if the salt's moving, it's moving towards wells 9 and 2. So that's kind of what we're worried about is we just committed this financial investment on well 9 and treating well 9 and well 2. And it would really be disappointing if over the next couple of years, this unmitigated salt keeps migrating from well 3 further down that aquifer. That would be a concern for us. So I think Continental would be something I would think about maybe asking to add that in, to keep that a low salt to the extent you can, to the extent you've been doing a good job on it, and it also helps the public realize as well with the signage and everything. So I think all these things working together would be helpful. But I kind of like that idea, Jamie. I was thinking of the same thing about if there's maybe 1 or 2 locations where it's maybe a lot more important, not just abide completely by the policy, whether it's a collector road or a secondary road, maybe something like that. I think that would be an appropriate comment.
Yeah. And one of the things that's easy for us, I mean, we're going to see the improvements of the policies in the program is going to be able to be observed very quickly within a year's time, 2 years' time, as to whether or not these efforts are actually helping. And so that's why it's, because it's a salt in and salt out scenario. So a lot of salt's going out through the surface water and moving on down the watershed. But we've got to figure out a way to measure the amount of salt that's going into the system. And then is that salt being reduced each year? I know we got different seasons in different scenarios, but if we're 5 years down the road and we continue to have the same volume of salt going in and it doesn't improve, we're going to lose more wells. I mean, we don't really have that option anymore. So we've got to look at, how effective this is going to be, because we're in danger lane. I mean, we're on the precipice of real additional problems. And as Don mentioned, the cost of treatment far exceeds PFAS treatment. It's not relevant. We'll end up buying water from from out of town or something to that end. But that's the point. So anything that you guys, Kyle, and your team can do to give us, and I don't know if this is within the realm of reasonableness, and I'll leave that up to you guys and the commission. It'd be wonderful for the commissioners to see the tonnage of salt that goes in each wellhead protection area each year. And I don't know if that's something that we could add to the process, or maybe that's a handshake, or maybe that's a wink, wink. I don't know, but it would be nice to be able to see that for our own benefit, to see what kind of, where we're seeing. Because we saw in 7 and 8, clearly the load of salt in the wellhead protection for 7 and 8 was reduced. And part of that is parking lots because of Home Depot and others, but we definitely saw a reversal in the sodium and chloride levels in that aquifer. But we're seeing the opposite in 4 and 5 and in 1, 2, and 3. So anything we can do to support the quantification of salt load is going to be useful.
I just had a question. You mentioned pre-treatment. What does that actually consist of? Is it a brine or is it actual salt crystal, the pre-treatment aspect?
So there's different methods, but to cut down on the salt, usually it's just salt on the spreader on the wet pavement. But we're going to cut down on that and pre-wet our salt. So we should be using less salt now moving forward with the new pre-treat.
So is that just wetting
The salt
crystallized salt to help it like dissolve as it spread?
Yep, it jumpstarts the salt brine.
Is that just like a water? It's not a
a brine.
brine. Oh, it's a brine on top of the salt crystals?
Correct.
Oh, okay. And you mentioned you had 6 trucks that actually are equipped with,
No, all 15 of our dump trucks are equipped with liquid.
okay, but that's not just brine itself alone, right? That's brine mixed with salt?
Brine is a salt water mixture,
Yeah,
and that's what we put on the salt. We apply it to the salt as it comes out of the chute.
but when I'm talking about brine, I mean, there are trucks that have a pump that just shoot just the liquid brine,
Correct.
no crystallized salt. We don't do any of that, right?
We haven't done that yet.
Okay.
We've experimented with a trailer. We do have a brine trailer that we have experimented with. With brine, just simply brine, we need the traffic count to get it to activate.
Okay,
And Merrimack doesn't seem to have the traffic counts to make the brine work as well as we'd like to see it work. So we are going to continue our experimentations, but I think that this pre-wetting the salt is going to cut our salt use and activate the salt better.
so that would dissolve the salt faster so that it's not there when you go by and plow it into the gutter, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's done its job.
yeah,
And it does, it also helps it to stick to the pavement better.
okay,
We use a number of techniques to try and keep the salt on the pavement and not in the gutter. We primarily place the salt at the center line of the road, and we let the crown of the road do the work to spread it out. Because we want to eliminate that scatter and that bounce into the gutter line where, the salt is expensive. We don't want to waste it. We want to keep it on the road where it does the work we need it to.
So to Kyle's point, one of the things that Dover found, which is very effective, is that they found that 40% of their salt was not even on the road after they spread it. It was going off to the edges and the side road. So when they use brine, they have brine trucks that they converted. I think Bill Belanger gave me their number. I think it was like $4,000, whatever it did to convert his trucks to the brine trucks. And that changed it from 40% loss to like 10% loss or even less, because like as Kyle said, the wetter the brine and the wetter the crystals, the more it's going to stick to the place you want it to be on. So that's why they've gone to brine exclusively, and not only that, it saved them so much money in terms of the salt that's why they said, why haven't we been doing this forever? They've been doing it for the last
Jamie,
several years.
are you talking about brine, not just liquid brine alone? You're talking about brine
I'm talking
salt.
about liquid brine first, and then that would get the pavement wet with,
okay.
as Kyle said, to anti-ice, right? Not react to the ice. So you're getting your anti-ice, you're getting your anti-icing up front, you're getting your wet crystals down later, and but it reduces the amount, and you don't have as much, as Kyle's mentioned, you get a lot of stuff if you're just spreading salt. It goes off the pavement, or not off the pavement, but off the road surface that you're trying to salt, because it just keeps sliding off to the edge. And then when you plow it, it plows it off. And half the time your salt is being plowed into the sidewalk. So, or side road, on the side area. So that I'm encouraging, the public works to use as much brine, as much pre-wet, as possible because it will save salt and it will be more effective, even in the medium, 30 to 28 to 33 time, temperature zones, which is where we're seeing a lot of this, not real heavy snows, but wet slushy mixture. But again, that's all as an attempt to reduce salt use, salt tonnage.
Real quick question. So policy and everything's understood and that makes a lot of sense. How do you police the policy? Do you like audit the drivers after the route was like, do you have somebody, a lawyer or somebody, are you like, driving the routes, right? Or, patrolling the routes after the drivers go through and confirming that the policy has been adhered to, or?
Absolutely. We have
Okay.
three foremen that are always on the road.
Okay.
I'm also in there.
Okay, so you're basically following the salt trucks either directly or with some time delay and
And if we see
you basically
them,
then,
yeah, bring it up.
then, okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
In addition to that, we would get a fair amount of complaints from the public
Well, I'm sure you are.
as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's public who know where the salt routes are
Yeah.
and the no salt routes are,
Right.
and they're not shy about giving us a call either.
Sure.
So they help to keep us in check as well as, like Laurie mentioned, the foreman staff that we have. Each one of them is assigned an area in town,
Mhm.
and that's their job during storms,
Okay.
is to kind of check out roads, make sure everything gets plowed, make sure the trucks are functioning, doing what they need to.
Good. Thank you.
So on the aquifer protection signs, that's what's Jamie's talking about ordering those.
Yep.
We're not ordering any salt signs or anything yet, right? Is that,
No, actually, we're not.
is that something
We're
the
planning
town,
to do.
okay. Are you gonna just have them say no salt, limited salt to kind of match the
Correct.
policy, right? Okay,
That's our intention,
yeah, I think that makes sense,
similar to the ones that were put on.
right? They're gonna say begin or end or anything like that, or probably just limited salt? Because I know
Yeah, I
sometimes,
don't think we've given it that much thought yet.
yeah,
Once you get your signs in and get them erected, we'll begin to mobilize that.
you have some existing signs out there that are probably gonna need to be pulled or,
Yeah. they all need to
Modified
be
or-
replaced.
right, right. Okay. All right, I mean, my first thought on this would that it would be more, I don't know if reliable is the right word. If your routes were broken up by low salt, no salt, limited salt, but obviously I'm not proposing that you have to change all your routes up because I'm sure that would just be the nightmare that would be beyond comprehension,
It wouldn't be practical.
Yeah.
We're not like a grid city, so it just, we really can't.
Yeah.
They don't interconnect well to be able to accommodate that.
Yeah. It just, whenever you leave things up to manual operation, when the driver needs to say, oh, I'm going into a no salt route, or a limited salt route, let me, click whatever device he needs to click to reduce the salt output. Just relying on someone to do that manually, whenever there's any manual reliance on anything, there's always, possibility for not doing it correctly or something, but I
Well, that's
really,
true, but keep in mind the simplicity of our procedure is typically we don't plow and salt at the same time. So we very specifically go out and pre-treat, and the operators know that's what they're doing, and that's their focus. They've done this for a lot of years. It's not hard for them because they know it's cold. Then they plow, and then they come back and they post-treat.
so they're doing the same route, no matter if they're plowing or salting or what, right? They're not, that not true? Is it just,
It's not true.
It's a different operation.
oh, all right, well,
So
that was,
we'll pre-treat, and that's all we're doing. Then we're plowing, and that's all we're doing. So at no time should they be plowing and treating, where they're not sure where they are, what they're doing.
oh,
That's
okay,
not usually the
And
operation.
if you look in the front of the procedure book before the plow routes, you can see the pre-treat routes.
Yeah,
And again, they're very clear. It's easy for the drivers to know exactly what to do. And they're smaller than the plow roads because we don't treat
you
it.
don't pre-treat everywhere. Yeah,
But generally, the person that, the operator that's plowing that route will later on, when you're in that
Post-treat.
post-treatment mode, will be post-treating. They're not skipping to a different route.
Correct.
Correct.
yeah. So at that opportunity, they're still going to be crossing over from limited salt to full salt. And they have to manually rely on, yeah. Yeah. All right, I mean, if they're trained, as well as they can be on that, I don't think there's really any way to kind of confirm or monitor that. But I guess that's just a limitation that's in place now. And, there's a lot, I mean, obviously we can get sophisticated to as much as we can, but there's a cost on that. And I think over the next few years, seeing if the salt levels in our wells can start coming down. And the other thing I was going to ask you about is, and obviously I think the parking lots are probably the bigger culprits in this than the town roads, to be honest with you. Because I know there's a lot of no salt areas right here in Continental, and I drive by and I look at the parking lots and they're loaded with salt. So the problem is we don't have a bylaw. That only covers new projects, but there's a lot of grandfathered projects. So it's a little difficult to try and go after that, So anyways, I just kind of wanted to make that last comment. So,
Yeah, maybe that's another comment to make to the town council. I'm not sure if they have any ability to change that or not.
right,
But
We've-
certainly the commissioners working with the council
right.
maybe could accomplish something on the private side. Obviously, Public Works has no ability to affect a change there.
Right. I think we actually did look into it, and I think we don't have the authority to do our own salt use bylaw. It would have to come from the town, right? Is that what I think we had a legal
Seemed
opinion,
like the way to go
For
with
that.
an ordinance more so than a
Right.
bylaw.
Right. And I don't know that we have the ability to implement that. So it would have to be something on the town level.
It would be town level, but I guess we could request it.
Yeah.
I actually think that was decided at the time that we want to approach the town council.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good.
Probably worth to make an action item on it, that we don't forget about it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you're looking for feedback on this by the end of the month, I think, right? July
Yes,
29th.
we plan to present this to the town council at their August meeting. They only have one meeting,
Right.
August 18th, I believe. So getting comments, a week or so before that would be great. Talking with Ron, I know your next meeting is the 15th, I think.
Yep.
If, obviously you guys have to respond as a commission. So if you could get me those Tuesday, the 16th, we can make that work.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else has reviewed anything, but I've just made like in the PDF file, I've got little sticky notes, I guess is what they call it, with little comments in there. And I don't know if you're looking for something more written out, but I don't know, maybe we can give this to you guys to kind of spell out in more detail, or if something like this is enough. I can maybe email you my comments and
I
have you
think a
just
written
look at
list
it or
would be
something.
better, because what I'm gonna do is, like I said, is copy each group's comments into a document.
One
and give it
overall.
To the town council, and I think the town council would appreciate a more abbreviated list than a sticky tabbed
Right.
76-page document.
And Don, I think we should, I mean, I have a number of comments that I'd like the board or the commissioners to consider. So what I'd like to do is get some to you, and then you can distribute as you wish, but send out some comments that, we can dial down, try to get it into a smaller amount so it's digestible, and then have one letter that comes from the MVD that just kind of summarizes it. So it's kind of can sort it out. But does that sound reasonable? Because I can get some of my comments to you, Dawn, in the next week or so.
Yeah, sure.
We just have to distinguish between the salt use policy of the DPW and salt mitigation ordinances that we may or may not want to pursue, right? Because they're really two different things.
There.
Right, yep.
So in
Definitely.
your comments, maybe you want to break this up as well.
Yeah. And Kyle, you're going to be at the meeting on Thursday, right?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
The
I'm
salt
sure it's on my
mitigation, yeah. Salt mitigation committee meeting, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
great. Because if you could, it would be great if you could just spend 5 minutes kind of, or, 6, 7 minutes, just talking a little bit about what the Public Works is looking at, just like you did tonight. That would be great.
I'd be happy to.
Great, thank you.
Great. I know we can go on. I know I certainly go on all night, but we, in the essence of time, we're gonna move it on. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. And Kyle volunteered to come here. I didn't even have to ask him. He actually volunteered when we had a
Awesome.
conversation earlier last week. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, taking the
sure.
time to come here. So
Thank
it's very helpful.
It's our pleasure. We, above all else, we know our stakeholders always inform the
Yeah,
project better than us trying to do it on our own.
Right.
And it's better to get everything out front early, and, regardless of the project, whether it's a bridge or a policy.
yeah.
It always
Agreed.
works better this way. I
Great.
appreciate your time.
Thanks for that. Thanks for coming.
Have a good night.
All right, awesome. So we're moving on. We are, where are we at now? Number 3. Board of Commissioners to discuss with Jamie Emery of Emery and Garrett, update to well 9 final report. So Jamie, you have the floor.
All right, well, good news, I think, for the most part. I mean, we got our comments back from DES. They were pretty much what we expected them to be. The MPA results, just for you, Don, was 0, meaning low risk for surface water influence. And then we had the aerobic spore forming bacteria analysis done for the stream and then the well itself. And this stream came up with high levels of aerobic spore forming bacteria, which we expected, and the well came up with 0. So we know that the well is not directly influenced by surface water. I mean, we have an influence on surface water, but it's not directly influenced. We're not going to have any issues with that kind of treatment or requirements or limitations. What we expected is that DES is concerned about the impacts on Natticut Brook, right? So if you recall, we went out a year ago and demonstrated that Natticut Brook was dry, and that when, and it was dry all the way along. So the argument here will be the same, that when the water level is 5 feet below the Natticut Brook, it doesn't matter if it's 5 feet or 10 feet or 15 feet, there's no more water coming out of the Natticut Brook if the water level declines further below that brook. The big issue is, does it recover during the year, so that when we're not mining water. So they want to ask us, or they've asked us to put together a groundwater monitoring program that will delineate that issue. I plan on sending somebody else, a couple of times down to take more pictures of the Natticut Brook. I think the real sticky point here is the fact that we have a greater permitted capacity. When you add up the permitted capacity of well 2, well 3, and the old well 1, I haven't found the exact documents for well 1, but I believe it was originally permitted for 350 gallons a minute. Well 3 was permitted for 800, and well 2 is permitted for 1,500. So 350, 800, and 1,500, right? So that comes out to be essentially 2,600 gallons a minute or so, something to that end, right?
Yep.
So that's 650 gallons a minute more than what we're asking for the combined pumping rate, because we're restricted by the vessels, of 2,000 gallons a minute from well 9 and well 2. The argument is, their argument is that regardless of your permitting, you only use 2 to 2.5 million gallons a day. So we may not, and at 2,000 gallons a minute, that's closer to 3 million gallons a day. So one of the things they're going to be probably banging their head on is What is the amount of going back to what is the amount of recharge that's available to sustain this number of gallons per minute? Now, we know, just looking at the records, and I had Ron and Jill pull out the records from 1997, 98, just to look at how much water was being pumped from wells 1, 2, and 3. And even a maximum day that I could find in those time periods was about 2.1 million gallons a day. And that's about 1,500 gallons a minute combined for those 3 wells. So 1,000 gallons a minute is about 1.5 million. And, so you're talking about almost 3 million. We never got to that point really with wells 1, 2, and 3 in terms of actual use versus their permitted capacity. So where does that leave us? That leaves us with, in reality, we might end up accepting a condition that says, look, we're going to permit this for 2,000 gallons a minute or 1,000 gallons a minute for well number 9. And we will monitor the usage to a point where we're not demonstrating that we have an impact on, an adequate brook in an adverse way. That's going to be a little tricky, but I think we can word it. Dan and I have talked about this at length. I think we can get this to work with these guys. And I think clearly we have to, but I don't see anything in the letter that really that caused me any heartburn. Everything that was written was what I considered it to, what we expected to have. And so now we just got to address a little bit about, how are we going to, what are we going to establish as a plan that demonstrates this over time? I think one of the things that's been missed is well 3 always had a big impact on Greens Pond, to the point where there was no overflow on Greens Pond, right? We take well 3 off. I'm going to be very interested to see if there's overflow in Greens Pond, just normally. We didn't see it when you weren't using well 3 last year. There was a period of time when Natticook Brook was completely dry all the way to Greens Pond. We had to release a couple of beaver dams, but so yeah, I want to continue to monitor that carefully. That'll be in our recommendation. But there's going to be benefits to not pumping well 3 on Greens Pond. Greens Pond's water level is going to stay high. So we will have some dilution as that water comes in to help also dilute, any sodium and chloride that might be, migrating in that direction. We're going to obviously have to monitor that from well 3. But I'm not worried. At this point in time, I'm not worried about the comments. It's going to take us a little time and effort to get through them, but they're not many. It's only 1 page essentially. So I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I think he was just going to ask us if we had questions. So yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So that letter, what concerned me a little bit, seemed to almost trying to argue that we don't need any more water. And
Right.
therefore we don't need to permit any, or they don't need to permit any more water.
Because we
Right.
didn't use the
Right,
full
we-
amount.
right.
Yeah, so we're penalized for that.
Correct.
So-
And I think it's important for DS to understand that the average consumption, the average use, right, isn't what we need to scale our pump rates and infrastructure for, but the peak rates.
Correct. Yeah.
So that argument, again, that letter seemed to almost indicate you guys don't need it anyway, so why are you even asking for that, right? And I think that is that old understanding we had for the longest time here, that the average rates and, over time are what we need to scale everything to. That's just not true.
Right. Well, and you're 100% right. And I think that's a challenge we're going to be faced with. I'm going to ask Ron and Jill to continue to look into the records to see what we can come up with as a peak demand from peak use from those 3 wells, 1, 3, and 2. Because I think any data that I can get on that historical use is going to be into our benefit.
So wells 1, 2, and 3, were those all 3 in use at one point in time?
Yes. Mhm.
All right, so you just calculated you had 2,650 gallons per minute between those 3 wells.
That's what's permitted.
Yeah.
But
So
what you actually use, the data that I had indicated that the max use of it 1, 2, and 3 was only 2.1 million gallons a day.
Right, but if we were still using wells 1, 2, and 3, no one would be asking us or concerned with our use unless
Correct.
we exceeded 2650 gallons per minute. So
Right.
because we didn't over pump those wells in their entire existence, because we were prudent not to,
Right.
why are we sort of, almost seems like we're being penalized by DES for being conservative and not, we could have went to irrigation every day, all day, everybody irrigates both even odd every day. But we're not, we're doing odd even, we're being prudent. I
Right.
can guarantee you those numbers would be much higher if we had every unrestricted irrigation. So I don't think it's fair, and I don't know if
I think
If
they're
you
just
can-
gonna come back and say, it's not about that. It's because we don't know what that level is gonna be. We can't assume that the 3 million a day that was permitted back then is still okay now, because we haven't seen it. So they want monitoring wells, right?
Yeah.
So put monitoring wells.
well, yeah, and then the thing is, if those monitoring wells start, they show something that we're not expecting, and all of a sudden we're gonna be limited to, so putting a new well in, we're trying to, I don't want to give up what permitted capacity we have. That's my point, is if we're planning on getting rid of, so look at this too, if we're getting rid, well 1's already decommissioned, well 3, if we abandon that. So there's 1,150 gallons per minute between well 1 and well 3, which are not going to be in use. 1,150 gallons a minute, that's gone. And we're only asking for 1,000 gallons a minute with well 9.
Correct. And that's what we're gonna go after. We're gonna go after it hard, right? So
Yeah.
so one of the things that, and I think we will get it. One of the things, as Will said, and this is a peak demand. You're never going to use 2,000 gallons a minute, 24/7, 365 days a year.
Right.
That's not gonna happen.
Right.
But so the only thing that I can see that you might be restricted from is maybe you use this hard during the summer, and during the spring and the fall, or a period of time you allow for recovery or something on that well. It might be the worst case scenario. That's what I'm
Right.
thinking. But I want to get it permitted for 1,000 gallons a minute. And they may put they may put a condition on it that we're willing to accept, or we go and we continue to fight for it. But
Right.
I also think that we want to, put this monitoring program in place so that we have a demonstration. I mean, the monitoring, in my view, is going to be in our advantage, because we've already especially I want to try to get it started. If we have another dry season here that demonstrates it's dry all the time, and we don't even have well 1 online yet, or well 9 online yet. We've got some data that, fortunately, the groundwater monitoring program that MVD has been doing for a fairly long period of time allows us to kind of utilize some of that data and leverage it in our favor. But I do want to, I was looking at monthly data. I want everybody to understand that. So when I saw 2.1 million gallons a day, I wasn't looking at daily maxes. So I'm going to ask Ron and Jill if they can dig into getting daily maxes at 1,000. I'd really like to see a higher daily max. So it might be closer to 2.6 million or 2.8 million or whatever that is. So we'll have to dig into the data a little bit more, but I don't have that. I don't have that data.
Just one other thing I just want to make a comment to is it's always good to have more approved capacity than your demand, obviously, because you got a plan. There's going to be some wells offline at some point. Something's going to happen. Treatment plant at 7 and 8 needs to shut down for 2 weeks because of, now that we have treatment, it's not just, before it was just if the water's in the well, we just pump it in the system. Now we got treatment filters to worry about. There could be restrictions in the filters. All of a sudden we got breakthrough in the beginning of the summer. We got to shut the filters down and replace the media.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have a little bit additional capacity to
Sure.
rely on. So maybe we got to pump well 2 and 9 a little bit more to make up for 2 weeks when two of our other wells are offline. So I'm hoping DES kind of is taking those things into consideration. I mean, even their own regulations require you need to have a certain capacity with your largest well out of service.
Service, right.
So
And one thing,
you know what I mean? If we
Yeah.
use 5 million gallons a day, we need more than 5 million gallons of capacity.
right. And one thing we might do, and this is what we did out in Mitchell Woods, and maybe do somewhere, we come up with an annual total, right? That says we're gonna pump 100 million, let's just use a number, 100 million gallons a day out of that well. We get to choose how to do that, not to exceed 1,000 gallons a minute, right?
Sure.
So something to that end that allows us to manage and be flexible and manage. And I think that's kind of creative thinking that DES should be able to comprehend.
Right. And the other important thing is, I think the treatment plant at wells 2 and 9, the carbon vessels are only going to be able to handle 2,000.
Correct.
So even if they permit us for more than that, we're probably never going to be able to pump that.
Yeah, well, we didn't ask for a permit of more than 1,000 gallons a minute because we didn't think we'd ever get there. So,
Right.
So that's our max pumping rate. I was surprised that it hasn't been uncommon for us to get a 7-page letter from DES, but these are pretty, there's a page, essentially a page letter of comments. It's not super critical. So they did not argue with any of the designation of the zone of contribution or the wellhead protection area or the contaminant threats area or the hydraulics of the pumping rate or any of that stuff. All that was, they found acceptable. So
Good.
I'm pretty pleased with it.
Looks like Peter has a question.
Yeah, Jamie, you mentioned that the 1,000 gallons a minute would be the largest, withdrawal capacity. So if, at least how we size the pumps out there, and I know we had to size those before we actually had well approval, but we sized that pump such that, we were shooting for, a range somewhere between 800 and 1,000 gallons per minute, but the pump could pump up to 1,250 gallons a minute. I believe those are the numbers, because so well 9 was sized that way. So in case well 2 was down for some kind of maintenance and you wanted to get a little bit more out of the aquifer, you could actually pump well 9, a little bit harder. And then conversely, we did the same thing for the well 2 pump. We had, again, we're shooting for a spot, mainly between the 800 and 1,000. But again, that had a capacity, to get up, to 1,250 if well 9 was down for maintenance. Is that still possible or not?
It's maybe possible, but the 1,000 gallons a minute is the basis for the analysis. So, that's in the real terms of operations, I don't think that's going to be a huge issue, but in the lines of permitting, I think there's going to be 1,000 gallons a minute. And, maybe we have that conversation with them at this point. I think we got to look at it more from an annual standpoint of total volume of water withdrawn, which would give us a little more flexibility.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we're going to get a, permitted production, a daily permitted production volume. So then we could pump it at, a little bit more than 1,000,
So you might get a daily, let's just say the daily, whatever 1,000, let me just see what that is. 1,000 times 1440 equals 1.44 million, right, in a day.
Yeah.
Well, you might pump it at 1,200 for 20 hours instead of 1,000 for, I mean, that I think is not going to be an issue.
Okay.
Have you seen permits where with 2 wells in the same aquifer, maybe each individual well has an individual day that's maybe the 1,200 or something, or 1,500, but there's a cap on the 2 wells combined that they can't exceed 2,000? Because I don't know if it really matters if we take more water out of well 9 than well 2, as long as the combination doesn't exceed, because it's the aquifer that they're really concerned about,
Right. They will. I mean, I think they probably are going to look at this holistically and say, this is the amount of water you can pump out of this in a day or in a month or in a year. But so far, they're really, their focus is right now on 9 and what we can do out of 9 is, and they haven't touched that old permit. So as I've seen it, so we'll see. As we dig into this a little bit more, I mean, I think once we get this agreed to, I mean, we're gonna have this public hearing process or allow this public hearing to happen. But that'll be sometime, in the fall probably.
Right. All right. So to kind of wrap this up, you're going to propose the well monitoring plan that they asked for.
We're gonna work on, response to their letter.
Right. And then what happens, what are the next steps after that? Do they issue like a draft approval and you have a public hearing or something or?
Correct, yep, yeah, they'll draft an approval, they'll go out to a public hearing, they'll receive comments they'll give a period of comments from anybody in
Right.
Amherst and everyone else, and then, last time we didn't have a public hearing because nobody had any interest. So.
Right.
Yeah, that could save us, I doubt people are gonna come to the table now because there's no reason to. There's no sensitive receptors that we're gonna be taking, particularly since we're only, we're essentially replacing well 3. Everybody should be coming and applauding you, not fighting you.
That's my point. Yeah. They're kind of forgetting that part, but.
Right. Which I think is a good point. Not to get off the subject, but when this goes to council, I really think either you or Wolf said, got to make the point of well 3 is being replaced because of the salt issue. And just to keep that on the front line with the town council. So they know that this policy, this procedure is critically important. Because I don't want, this is another question we're gonna have to answer, and I'd like to get your first cut response tonight. I don't want you to put away, I don't want you to decommission well 3. I would like you to keep that available for emergencies.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, but not if it's at the peril of losing approved capacity at well 9, I think.
Yeah, I don't think we will, but I mean, I agree with that, but
Yeah.
I'd like to fight for keeping well 3 in play.
I'm also not sure what the situation is with the manganese at 0.3, if there's going to be a requirement that you can't put manganese at 0.3 into a system. Because that well is, I think it's pretty consistently above 0.3 when it's active.
I believe you can still use it. It's gonna have PFAS, elevated PFAS as well, so.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know that we'll be able to use well 3, but that would need to be clarified. Maybe that's
would
an
have-
action item, I think.
Well, they have to be blended. You would have to blend it.
Yeah, I would agree with Ron that the PFAS is gonna be an issue. You'll fail that within the first year. And then if you want to blend, then that right now is just pumping straight into the distribution system. You would have to repipe that to another location
Yeah.
where it could be blended.
Yeah. But that's something I think you should have in the back of your head, is thinking about maybe that occurring. Because what happens is the water quality, when the Greens Pond water level is high in the spring, the water quality is good. When the Greens Pond level drops, the water quality deteriorates. And that's kind of how it's always been.
So we have talked to DS about using as an emergency source, and really all we have to do is notify them and let them know that it's coming on and just track how long we use it for.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it'd be the same with manganese or,
All right, I mean, maybe that's something we need to look into more closely.
you could ask the question again, but that was originally what was, the intent was to keep well 3 as an emergency source, and the only requirement was just notification,
Yeah,
probably a nitrate sample,
okay.
but
Nitrate and bacteria. Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Anything else on this, Jamie, or that's pretty
No,
much?
I think that's pretty much it, and I appreciate it. I'm really excited. Are you going to be at the on the meeting on Thursday or not, Don?
Yeah, I will be there. Yeah.
It won't be a long meeting. I don't expect it to be more than an hour.
Good.
But one
All
thing,
right.
we will get an update from Fidelity, which is going to be important. So
Good. That's good to know.
Yep.
All right. Anything else, guys? Or are we good to move on? We'll let Jamie off the hook. I don't think he's on anything else here, right? So I guess thanks for your time and on this, and appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, look forward to talking to you again.
All right, have a great evening.
Have a good
You
night.
too. Yeah, bye, guys.
But
All right, so moving on, the Finance Human Resources Review with Michelle. Thanks for being patient.
I had included in the packet the previous year comparison. But as I'm sure you noted, there were the accounting entries in the previous year's numbers. We just did an upgrade to our reporting system and it wasn't allowing us to customize the report to pull that out. But I still included it so that line by line, you could see what the changes were. But we've since fixed that. So I do have the preliminary summary numbers. I would say at this point, our income is fairly solid. We might have a few very small invoices from closing out some work orders that we need to create for transactions that were performed by June 30th. But our expenses, we are still having additional expenses coming in. We've already had about $40,000 in invoices, and Kristen is reviewing the open POs with Brian, our ops manager, to just run through, check in with people to see if things needs to be closed out, invoices are coming, or funds will need to be encumbered and carried over to the next year. So with the year complete, the preliminary numbers are showing that our revenues were just over 5 million and our expenses just under 4 million, resulting in our net ordinary income being slightly over $1 million. This does include the move of the purchase of Pentachuck water up into the expense line. So that is coming out of budget dollars, since we saw that our net ordinary income was ending so strong that we had sufficient funds to take it out of budget and then to leave the amount that is in the non-capital reserve for water purchase for the continuing water purchase per the PUC agreement. So with coming in a little over 1 million this year for the net ordinary income, we were $473,000 above where we fell last year. As I said, we've already seen 40,000 in expenses. I wouldn't anticipate that going over $100,000, so we're still going to be pushing $400,000 above where we stood last year. So current year, all main water revenue accounts came in 100% above 100% of budget, with the revenues overall being little over 112% of budget. Expense accounts are coming in at 88.6% of budget, and even with that potential additional 100,000 in expenses to be recorded, we would still only come in at 90.9% of budget. And as I mentioned, we did move the water purchase to a budget expense line. We'll also note that we did make the inventory adjustment. We will, going forward, be doing that at least on a quarterly basis. We had some issues with our elements reports that we're resolving. So we did the full year based off of the actual physical inventory, which will always still have a physical inventory at the end of the year, but that should just be a small adjustment. But the parts that do come out for various work orders and transactions will be being adjusted on the financials at least quarterly going forward in this year. And that was about $72,000 that came out for just R&M and various expense accounts. Also to be noted, even with our net ordinary income where it is, now a little over $1 million, likely to come in a little under $1 million with final numbers, we will also have encumbered funds. So that will be the accounts payable expenses from this year that we haven't spent yet, that are under contract, that perhaps for some reason or another, were anticipated to be finished by 6:30, but we're not. So those funds will also, they'll be restricted. So while our net income, say, may fall at $950,000, there could be, as I said, I don't have numbers now because we're just doing the review, but we could have 100, 200,000 or more that is restricted from what actually ultimately becomes the unassigned fund balance. And then we'll also have pension liabilities from NHRS, which those are done as part of our audit. And last year, while we also had a very healthy initial net income for budget revenue versus budget expense, we discovered that we had a $400,000 adjustment to our pension liability. And that strictly comes from the analysis done at NHRS, reviewed by our auditors, and then we report to our books. And that varies greatly. I have seen adjustments of $80,000 or $100,000 down, and then last year we got it in like $400,000 up. And they're just analyzing how their investments are doing, who's retiring, how is it against their projections, and just annually we take the apportionment that they give to Merrimack Village District and record it accordingly on our books as a liability. So that would also take away from, if it is an increase to the liability, what is our unassigned, totally unrestricted, unassigned fund balance. And also with the ultimate surplus that we would have, we can evaluate what we want to do with our capital reserve and non-capital reserve accounts. This year, we took almost $900,000 out of equipment and facilities for various items. One of the policies that the auditors would definitely like us to see put in place in the coming months, definitely within the coming year, would be a fund balance policy, what we agree to maintain as our unassigned fund balance. There's various input from different agencies, and there's various industry information that we will review, and then we can determine, do we want to keep 3 months worth of our budget as our unassigned fund balance? If we fall below that, we should have a plan as to how long we're going to take to bring it back to that level, as well as where do we want to maintain our capital reserves, and just keep evaluating both. So where's our unassigned fund balance going to fall? Where do we want to keep our capital reserves? And just keep, as I said, monitoring and adjusting accordingly. So does anyone have any questions on just the general summary figures and results?
I have a quick one. So first page of that summary here, account 60650 filtration PFAS. Year-to-date actual is 0. Budget is 65,000 for the 4 and 5 GAC filters lasting longer than anticipated. I don't understand that comment respectively.
Budget for a change out.
When we did the budget, we anticipated there would be one change out.
Right, but they really lasted not longer. We just decided we're gonna have them run longer because we want to gather data.
True.
So I guess
Okay, then
It might be.
There was a
Right,
misinterpretation
right.
from my.
I'm just more, so, and again, this, the budget, I'm sorry, the package doesn't make it to the public, right? I mean, so,
No.
okay, so it's maybe not as critical, but I just want to be cautious with what we're saying about that filtration media, because
Yeah, it's true.
it's certainly not lasting longer than anticipated, specifically if there's discovery. Not that, when I say the packet isn't public, or it's not that I want to hide something, but if there's discovery in a lawsuit and there's a comment on here in a document inside of MVD related that says that TAC filters lasting longer than anticipated.
Could I have,
We can-
could I have clarification
Sure.
on that?
So
So what is actually happening? Because my understanding was this
Well-
situation, both Kristen and I.
We anticipated it lasting longer. So what it's actually breaking through. Sooner, the PFOA is breaking through sooner than was expected.
Through the
So it's
lead
actually
vessel.
a warranty item,
Right.
that we're discussing with the Volvo.
So the correct wording, I think, should rather be that 4 and 5 GAC filters, used for a longer duty cycle for testing purposes. That's probably a better way to put that. We decided to keep them longer,
And
but fact is that they actually lasted shorter.
And in fairness, it really just sort of came on quick. So it was actually, we were getting good use out of them up until a month ago, 2 months ago, then all of a sudden it broke through. But
Okay, so that might be that our conversations before this comment has been there, just stayed there because I wasn't aware of the change.
Which is, and I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm just
Oh, no,
reading this and I'm looking at this like a
No, I
lawyer and I'm like,
definitely
oh,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
right. That's a nice little anchor to hook a defense on, right? So, or not a defense, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if you actually looked in the settlement agreement, they targeted 2 years. Didn't make it.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. Right.
So,
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
okay. Any other questions from the summary numbers I reviewed or from the expense budget versus actual? Any particular accounts that,
I didn't really have anything
Nope.
at all.
okay.
I think I ask this every year, what happens with the surplus?
What do you mean?
Well, we can't just bank it, right? It has to go into capital reserve, right?
No, it is
No?
banked. It is in our.
It is banked.
Yeah. It's just on our books recorded properly restricted or unrestricted. And that,
So unlike the school district that can't keep it in their accounts, that basically has to return it to the ratepayer or to the taxpayer, we don't have that obligation.
no, we're an enterprise fund, so we are allowed to accumulate our surplus.
Okay. So it just carries over into the new year and is cash flow basically,
Yes, we.
or not
we
cash
do
flow,
the
as
time-
cash reserve.
Yeah, as long as we have things, appropriately budgeted for the given year to cover something like next year when we get to make the first PFAS loan payment.
Mhm.
Cash flow wise, we're going to be drawing.
Right.
From our fund balance, but by the end of the year, that will be taken care of by the revenues.
Okay. Thank
you. And the only other thing I would comment on is the bank balances. To note that with Turkey Hill complete and our retainage returned, as well as the Penta work on 4 and 5 and all retainage returned. The Turkey Hill booster account is closing in July, as well as the Penta escrow account. And also, we exhausted the unspent bond proceeds for new well development. We had been paying for various things for ongoing expenses, and then we were able to look back at some things associated with new sources that we had gauged for capital reserves. But we really wanted to get, this money really needed to get spent as soon as it could. So we did a reimbursement back to the operating account. So now that's depleted. And also to note too, our Bean Road bond just got paid off. So we just completed a bond with the payment this month.
Bean Road?
Bean Road,
Road.
it's a 20-year bond, but we just did our final principal payment.
What was that for?
A water line extension?
It was a petition water line extension for Beacon Road. They had a fire out in that area. Got a petition, and then, yeah, we
Upgrade the,
got water main all out through there. It's been 20 years.
That's last principal payment.
well. Good. Was that principal, offhand?
The final,
I mean, the payment that we were making?
the final payment that we made was $75,000.
Okay, good. That's good. So it'll be 75 grand less that we have to pay every year, right?
Yep.
Let's find something else.
Any questions?
No, anybody else?
Items?
I think we're good. You guys good?
Okay,
Thanks, Michelle.
thank you.
Thanks for hanging in there for a long time.
I keep my third Mondays flexible.
All right, good. So next item, number 4 is update from Underwood Engineers on ongoing projects. So hopefully this will be pretty quick, Peter. Thanks for hanging in there for this one too.
No problem, yeah. Yeah, so I'll start with 7 and 8. So you are continuing to operate that facility. Back in May, I think you remember that when we at the last meeting, we noted that there was high head loss in vessel number 1. So and we spoke with Evoqua, and we decided, they recommended that you would backwash that vessel. And we did that on June 9th. Once that was done, the head loss did go down. It did not go down to the original level that it was, but it did go down. And then it started to, we started to operate it again. And since that time, the head loss has again rose up. We have spoke with Evoqua, and they have not gotten back to us on a couple issues on this. One, on June 9th, when we did do that backwashing of the vessel, multiple water samples were taken. So they took samples of raw water. They took samples of the water coming out of the green sand. They took water samples coming out of the GAC. They took multiple samples coming out of the backwash as we were running that, trying to determine, to see what the water quality is and see if there's anything happening with that. We contacted them last week and asking them for an update on that, and we have not heard back. So we will be pushing them, trying to get some results on that to see what there might be with that, that system. So
Is it, it's not to the point of restricting flow or anything that we're gonna be concerned about yet?
it doesn't restrict flow, but it adds head to it, and then you just increase the pressure, you just, increase the speed of your well pump so you can, create more head to drive it through it,
Yeah.
So the one thing that we did find, and I don't know if you remember this from the last meeting, but Brian did, because we have those 25, 50 and 75% ports, sample ports coming down, and they're all attached, or the spigots are all at the same location. So we ended up putting a pressure gauge on each one of those, and we found that the head loss was not uniform through the whole vessel. It was, mainly in that top 25%. So there's something happening there. And I think with Evoqua has some hint that it might be, some kind of chemical, I don't know if something's happening with, getting through the green sand and getting onto the bed. But when we did backwash it, we were looking at the samples when they're all coming out. Everything looked clear to the eye, but that does not mean that it is clear. So we're still trying to, look into that and figure that one out.
What are you, who was collecting the samples? Was it Evoqua or was it our own team?
It was Evoqua doing it.
What were they sampling for? What are they analyzing? Just visual, or are they running?
No,
like
they wanted to, I think they have a hunch that some kind of, dissolved, iron or manganese is still getting through the green sand, and then is over time, it just slowly, filters out on the bed of the GAC. And he was mentioning something to that effect.
But that hasn't been confirmed or anything.
It is not, yeah. That's why that was just one thing that he did mention, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably makes sense in the future if they ever sample stuff like that, if we get duplicate samples for ourselves to hold on to, and because if they're running tests and coming out with results, be good to have those be reproducible on our own end as well. Just to kind of make sure what they're reporting jives with what we might be seeing.
Yeah.
So we're still waiting for them at this point to come back to us with a recommendation on what they think we should do about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
But
Ron, do you know what the head loss pressure is up to now?
I do not.
Yeah.
I know it's getting up there, so
Yes.
we're gonna need to do a backwash soon.
So that puts back pressure all the way through the green sand vessels, all the way back to the wells, right?
It does?
Yeah, because it's the well pressure that pushes through all those filters and then it goes into the clear well. So that's going to go back to that's what he was saying. We have to increase the pump capacity to push the extra pressure through.
So we can bypass the green sand filters?
Well, you wouldn't want to do that because then you'd be running iron and manganese
No.
into the carbon.
It goes right to the carbon filters from the green sand. So we go through the green sand, it goes right into.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you were going through the green sand backwards and I was like, no.
No,
Right, okay.
no.
Right, okay.
So that extra pressure going through the green sand, does that have any issue with the green sand vessel?
No, because
Shouldn't affect anything, right?
there's some systems that use that exact, system, and they
Run at
just
higher
run the
pressure.
pump right through that, and then instead of going to a clear well, it goes right to the system, so.
Oh, yeah, because when it dumps in a clear well, you're basically at zero, right? Atmosphere.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So really all you're doing is after the green sand vessel, you're now changing the effluent and influent port, or not port, but connection to the GSE, right?
What do you mean?
Well,
Yeah.
it'll change when the,
Or inverting, flipping.
as the
Backwash the
vessel
yeah.
gets, as the media gets used, we will switch to lag.
No, I'm talking about the backwash.
When they backwash.
When
the
you
carbon.
backwash, you just flip the
Oh,
effluent
leach.
of the green sand to go to the effluent of the GAC vessel instead of the influent.
Or you can use distribution water.
yeah, it comes from distribution,
Okay.
yeah.
So would you just shut the wells off and then backwash through the
Yeah.
distribution system from system
Hmm.
water?
Yeah,
Okay.
technically you still
Right.
could run through the other one, but yeah,
Right.
we shut it down and ran back from distribution.
Okay.
In the last meeting, we had talked about putting a date stamp on the data tables and the charts for the different data points that we chart, contaminants and so on. So we remember if anything changes.
You're
what may have
talking about
triggered it.
on the PFAS charts?
Right, well, not just
Yeah.
PFAS, also the other ones really, but specifically the PFAS charts, yeah.
Yeah.
Was that done?
So we're
Has that been
plotting the
done?
PFAS charts, but what do you do? What were you asking to put on those?
A marker on, when was the first backflush and here this new
Oh,
one?
backwash, okay.
Backwash, I'm sorry. We had said that we want to make sure that this is visible on the charts.
How to record the date.
The dates.
On the charts now.
Because now this is going to be the second date we want to put on those charts,
Yeah,
right?
So the first one was when we got the iron out and put it in service. And the second one was when we had the backwash.
yeah, no, actually, the first one was the June 9th. We were forward
backwash.
flowing with trying to get the iron out. We did not backwash.
Okay,
Right.
And then,
When we jump
So-
up the media, basically, we want to see on those charts every time we jump it up the GAC.
yeah, I'll pass that off to Billy to get that a line on there.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't know if I want to do a to-do out of that, because this was already forgotten once. Might be a good idea to make a to-do out of that.
Yeah.
action item.
Action item. Sorry,
Yep.
it's been a long day.
And this is where that iron analyzer will come in handy, when we were talking about it before,
Yeah.
just, if you have, so right now we're taking grab samples of that, of, the iron coming through. It would be nice if we just had a constant, running, data on that. So, we could take it, at a high point, you could take it at a low point, you could be sort of tricked, but if you have constant data, then you can see the trending of it, so.
So I assume the analyzer has data recording capabilities that you can download and store the data, right? The iron
No, it
concentration.
sends it to the SCADA, and the SCADA stores it.
All right, yeah,
Historical
Yeah.
trending there.
good.
Yeah.
Because that way,
Yeah,
if
so-
any, because I could see a Volk was saying, well, how do we know your green sand filters didn't fail and you loaded the carbon up with your own iron,
Yeah,
so it'd be good to have a record of what the iron was coming out of the green sand vessels
right,
going into the carbon filters.
Yeah.
That we can say, no, we didn't. This is the record of it,
yeah. And then,
Know what I
and
mean?
then in terms of the one thing that, with these backwashes, Volco has been, as we've been working through the different projects on the well 4-5 project, the O&M manual said, if you have high head loss, just backwash your vessel. Okay, and that's pretty much what it said. On the 7 and 8, it says, if you have high head loss, backwash your vessel, but your warranty is void if you do it more than, and I forget, I think it's 5 times, but I'm not positive. So then if you do backwash it more than 5 times, you're void. And then when the well 2 project came out, they had it even stricter
Once.
on that. So I think they're seeing, that, once you do mix up, as Wolf's saying, you want to know when you mix it up, because, does that affect what's, coming out of on the bottom end, so.
Take life away from the media, yeah.
Yeah, so that is something that, we're also looking at, so we want to make sure, if you have high head loss, then yeah, you got to do something about it, but we don't want to be backwashing it every 2 weeks, because all of a sudden you just, immediately void your warranty.
Even though we're not sure what's the cause of it, and
Yeah, and that's why we're trying to find it
Yeah.
out. So we're trying to sort of run it,
if it's a media problem or if it's a water chemistry problem or some kind of bacteria or something that's not related to the media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we were having a slight technical problem as that pressure went up, and then it required the well pumps to be running at a higher pressure. The chem feed pumps that were designed, to pump in the caustic, they were, I believe they were 60 PSI pump, but we were, approaching, the mid 50s, and Brian was seeing that those pumps could not keep up. So he ended up changing those pumps out to a pump that has a higher capacity. So as this head loss goes up, it's not, we were, getting close to a point where Brian was really worried that he wasn't going to be able to adjust his pH properly because of the higher pressures, and sort of having to, forced to do that backwash. Now with the higher capacity chem feed pumps, you can go a little bit longer.
Okay.
So would it make sense, would it help anything to take like a mechanical sample? right? I don't know if we have port openings or something that you can actually take a
Like a
physical
core
example.
sample. And then
Core
they,
sample,
Oh.
exactly right, yeah.
Talking about that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, we discussed that, but the thing is you would have to get to the top of the tank, open the hatch, and then do that. So that's where you would have, and that's one of the things that we have talked about,
right. Or at least inspect and see if there's a layer of something on the top or whatever. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, so you'd have to, open that port, you'd want to drain that, that vessel down, just so,
Gets below the top. Yeah. The
Yeah.
headspace is drained and
yeah.
yeah.
So it'll take a little bit to do that, but yeah, we have talked about that.
So if Evoqua is, hopefully they don't continue to be, I don't know if the word non-responsive is really accurate. I don't know how long they've been taking to
Yes,
respond to you.
so, yeah, he mentioned he had, some appointments he had to go to, and he was, he wanted to get back to us, but he, when we sent them that email last week, it was Thursday, and we haven't heard from him since then, so.
Oh, it's
It
only a
hasn't
couple
been,
days,
hasn't
right?
been a week, but we can give him a little nudge again tomorrow and just find out.
Who is that you're dealing with? Is it John Lombardo?
Yeah, John Lombardo, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any questions on wells 7 and 8, or I can move on to well 2 and 9? All right.
Okay.
What do you got on wells 2 and 9, Peter?
Well, 2 and 9, so the work continues out there. It's kind of, fairly steady work out there. The longer lead items, and I know we talked about this before, are the butterfly valves. All those butterfly valves are on site except for the class 250 valves. And those are, we're using those at the existing well 2 building and on inlet piping to the vessels. And we had higher pressure rated valves on that. So in case we went to a polishing treatment system after the green sand, we wanted to, account for that additional head, so you didn't have to replace the valves. So those are due to be shipped in mid-September, which seems like it's going to work, as long as everything comes through. The generator is scheduled to be shipped mid-August. That's pretty good. The VFD for well 2 is mid-August, and the VFD for well 9 is mid-December. So that's what we know, on the longer lead items. Rest of the stuff, some items are a little tougher to get, but it doesn't seem like there's any issues, getting anything right now besides those.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, they are looking at, the contractor has noted a substantial completion date of December 16th. In his last schedule. The well 2, the existing well 2 building is scheduled to be shut down on August 29th to start doing that work in there. We want to continue to monitor the precipitation that we've been getting and the usage that the that the system is consuming and how much water we're pumping in, to see if we need to modify that date. So we're going to be doing that,
Right.
over the next month. So at the next project meeting that we have with them, which will be in roughly 4 weeks, we can, inform them if we want to make any changes to that. So,
Yep.
because once we take that well offline, it's, they'll immediately pull the RTU panel off there and, new electrical. So that facility, once we, sort of pull the plug on that facility is not going to be up and running until it's run, until we get the new VFD and the new well pump in there. So, but we're, hopeful that, well 3, could be used, it's still able to be used right now, through the state. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that.
All right, yeah, it'd be good to keep us informed when you're planning on doing that. We'll have to look at if we're in a drought situation and what the forecast looks like and whatnot.
Yeah, we've been talking to Ron on that. We plan on continuing to talk to him and, you know, and make a decision, you know,
Right.
together on that. Yeah.
If there's any question on whether we can't shut it down, we'll definitely, we need the water, we need it.
Yeah, I agree. It's our biggest well. I don't want to be without it. So what's on right now? Generally 2, 3, is 3 on 2?
3's ready to go. We haven't had to put 3 on.
All right, good.
So we're still, once the Pentachuck connections is open and everything else has been running. So
You had told me they restricted us a little bit for a couple days
for a
on
couple
that.
days, we're back up to,
Some,
no, you just jinxed me again. They're gonna call me later.
So we're still using Pentachuck?
Yeah.
Oh, I misunderstood that. I thought we stopped using it when 7 and 8 came back.
No. We stopped for a little bit, but once demand picked up, we went in that order. So the Pentachuck interconnect was opened back up again.
Okay.
As demand increased, then that well 2 came back up online.
Okay.
And we run it accordingly. So as the demand drops, 2 will lessen and
so Pentachuck's the priority over well 2, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then well 3 was just in case, because if we got into this drought, we'd probably need even more than that, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? I know there's another item on here about an easement or something for at wells 2, 9. There was a,
the electrical easement.
yeah. Is that something you're gonna talk about, Peter?
I think Ron has that. He put that in the packet, I believe, right?
Okay.
It's just something we need to vote on, just the board needs to be aware of. They're asking for the easement in your packet. There was highlighted or where the easement was.
Is it normal for the easement not to contain any wording for consideration of the property owner? It seems to be pretty much a free fall. They don't even have to knock. They can just waltz up and start digging stuff apart as long as you put it back together. There, you know, you would think that there should be verbiage in there to wording in there to you know, to at least announce that they're gonna be doing some work there and inform the property owner.
I can look into that. I don't know. I mean, I was kind of surprised that we had to have an easement for them because there wasn't one in place before and we never restricted them from coming up and down the road. If they had to do work, they'd come down.
I can understand the reason for an easement, but it just seems to be like like a total free for all. There's no accountability, nothing other than trying to put things back together again the way they were. But they could basically show up at 2 a.m. in the morning, rip everything apart and then never talk about it, right? So I'm not so sure if I'm.
There's no, the wording doesn't say that they gotta give us notice or anything
No, I
like
don't
that?
see anything in it.
I don't know.
So I would definitely run this maybe past the lawyers, that easement.
What, so where, I can't really tell where the easement is on this plan, if it's shown or not, but,
So it's the highlighted area.
The gray stuff,
oh, right down in here.
the big fat one.
Great. I thought that was pavement. I don't know.
And it doesn't, I believe that was highlighted in pink, but it
Yeah,
isn't.
Even a hard time.
All right, so they just want an easement over where their service lines come in?
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be too much of a big deal.
And so the only thing about this easement is they need a vote at a meeting to approve it, you know, before it can be finalized. And, you know, just in terms of, you know, if we wait another month to come back to you, you know, that just, I don't know exactly what that does on schedule. I know the contractor was looking for this and we told them, yeah, we would probably have it at this meeting. So I don't know, do you feel comfortable conditionally approving it, you know, based on
Fine with that. I mean, in the end, it's your problem, right? Not the board's. It's really your problem, not the board's. If you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it. But I just found it, again, a certain amount of courtesy would be appreciated and it wouldn't hurt to have that in writing, right? But I mean,
Not much courtesy in the water business, is there?
no, So I have no problem voting on it, but
Yeah,
I recommend that maybe you guys run it past the legal.
So I can run it through legal, barring there's no significant. If they're fine with it, then
yeah. All right,
I can do it.
do we need an official vote for that, you think, or just,
He has directions
Yes.
to check with.
I think you do, yeah.
you do?
Yeah, but if he has to check with legal and we vote yes, and legal says no.
A conditional.
Yeah, conditionally, yeah.
So if everybody's fine with it.
Subject to approval of legal counsel.
Yes.
I hear a motion for that.
So moved.
All right. Motion to approve the easement subject to agreement with legal counsel. Or second.
Seconded.
Motion by Wolf, second by Ken. Any other questions, discussion? If not, we'll signify by saying aye. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I think that was 400. All right, good. So you got that.
Can we get an update on that then on, prior to the next meeting? I don't just want this to be happening right now, so.
As soon as I get that, then I'll send it out.
Are you going to, what legal are you going to on that one? Is it, Greg Michael or,
I didn't give it a thought. I was just,
all right, I don't care, whatever. I mean, on something like this, I don't know, I think Greg would be okay if, because I know Carrie's still out, but I know she's got someone else in place, but whatever you want. I'll let you
and I
make that.
have, probably would have ended up over at Kerry.
Yeah. All right, and moving on, the next item is update on the possible grant from DES to extend main lines to private well affected areas affected by PFAS. Anything new on that one?
Not a whole lot. We have been in contact with Amy Russo. I've updated the distribution map to reflect mains that weren't on there that were watering locations. He has sent us back the areas that have exceedances. So I'm in the process and I haven't had time to do it yet, but working to a map similar so that I can, something to go by to start pricing to it. So it's still, everything's still in motion. We're still, and I did have a conversation with Keith as well. And we were talking about, Dawn and I were talking about a way that possibly get some more not more funding, but utilize the funding that we have, maybe a little bit less engineering. And when I talked to Keith, it's not gonna be the same involvement as our 4 and 5, the pump house design. So there's it'll definitely be
A little more streamlined.
yes, yeah, there'd be less and I guess we can also talk about how much we wanna, if we wanna take on some of the putting things out to bid and that kind of stuff as well. So there's stuff to talk about to get those costs down. Not that we have costs yet for anything, but
Do you think you have the time available for that, or, I mean, I don't wanna overload you and then have it take longer either.
no, absolutely. So I mean, that's something we'll probably something to consider, but I think we need to, once we kind of get a little bit further here, we'll meet with Keith again and see get some, some costs together and see what the engineering services would be. We can go from there and how much we can take on, but
All right, so at some point there'll be a engineering service request coming from Underwood to involve some of that design. And I know we talked about whether, does the whole corridor need to be surveyed, or do we have plans that we can use?
and that's what he was saying. And so it's not as detailed as like a treatment plant. So
Okay,
yeah, the surveys wouldn't have to be done more than likely.
not like you gotta survey the whole
Right.
mile of pipe or whatever.
We're putting pipe on a road, so we really can
And then you did confirm with DES that we could actually do multiple grants, right? Because what are they, $1.5 million grants?
It is, and that's one thing that Amy did say was, because I was a little confused by it, because we had originally talked about the town possibly
Applying for a
applying
grant.
for a grant, and we would apply for a grant to make that, you know, a $3 million grant to do some more work. And it sounded like the town option wasn't there, but we could apply for multiple, so.
Huh. All right. Well, if you get too overwhelmed, I mean, maybe we can have Underwood take a more active role. It's up to you. If you're willing to, you know, work it through, then
Yeah, I've already kind of
nice thing.
some maps, and I have some ideas on how we can, you know, I just lost my, Tomahawk and Great Stone, I think
Right.
we may not have the funds, if we do get funds, to do the whole project, but we can definitely do the areas that have the exceedances coming in from Tomahawk, so
Right.
we can phase it.
Okay.
And if you do get more than the million, and you know, if you get, you know, say 3 million, you can't get two of them and then say, oh, let's do a project for 3 million. It has to be $1.5 million for one project.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then $1.5 million for another project. So, you know, so if you get
Yeah.
a $2 million project, you have a $500,000 shortfall on that. So,
Yeah.
I almost think you'd want to do that anyways, just so you can cover more ground of the people that are affected. The affected wells get, you know, remediated or fixed, so.
Right. So at some point, I think, you know, we want to try to shoot for the actual grant applications. I don't know if you have an idea when that might be ready. You know, we were talking originally about having it at our June meeting. Now we wouldn't be talking about earliest is August.
We want to do them sooner than later. So I will get on those maps soon and we'll get on the.
All right. So construction season, I guess we probably missed this year's window now, probably.
oh, you definitely did. Yeah, they, right now we're seeing, you know, if we went with ductile iron pipe, they're saying 35 to 40 weeks delivery.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's exactly. I'm putting a project out, you know, which is finishing it up right now. It's about 4 miles worth of pipe. And it's supposed to be all ductile, and we're putting it out right now and saying start of construction is April of 23. You know,
Wow.
and it might even be, you know, May or June, you know, all the time we get the pipe, you know, so.
God.
Really, it's really a strange thing. And then the problem is they also, they're not, you know, you order the pipe now and they're not telling you what the price is going to be. Once it gets delivered, that's what you're paying, you know, so.
Oh, my God. What else in the world do you ever buy like that? You know,
I know, it's crazy. And then, you know, we're trying to look at, you know, what do you do for, you know, material escalation, just so the contractor doesn't put, you know, too much on it, you know, blow the budget out, you know, but it's hard to, you know, find something exactly that's going to be fair to all parties and stuff. So.
and then we also, has Saint-Gobain come to us yet about, there's some extensions they need to do to our system as well, right? On their dime. So that's even more
Yeah,
competing pipe that's gonna be competing with, you know.
I don't know if they, I'd have to look back. I know we met. I guess there would be a couple extensions. It's with Wildcat Falls area. I know.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it was gonna be just,
But they haven't approached us yet, is what I'm asking. As
we
far
had
as, you know.
we had a startup meeting and I don't recall if we got a list or not from them. I'd have to go back and look, but.
Right. Okay. All right, let's, I guess we can move on. Any other questions on that?
I think you're all set with
So,
me, right?
I think so, Peter, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging in there.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. Have a good night.
All right, you too. Okay, so next is the minutes from June 20th, 2022. Does anybody want to make a motion to accept those minutes and offer any corrections or amendments?
To approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion by Wolf, second by John. All those in favor Approve the minutes,
Aye.
signify by saying aye. Aye, 400, so the minutes are approved. Where are we next here? We are looking at
Action
action
items.
items,
I don't think we have any pending right now.
right? I know you had some those updates in our packet or the email today about item number 2.
Yep.
Yeah, to try to move this along. I don't know if there's anything more here.
Numbers, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, did you reach out to,
Lou, is that, oh,
Yeah.
yes, I did reach out to Lou. Actually, he called me earlier and I wasn't in a place to take his call.
What number is that you're looking at?
60.
60?
He says it is NSF approved.
Oh, really?
And it
And he
almost-
provided you documentation for that?
That was
No.
verbal.
Just
That was verbal.
like all of the performance and everything has been verbal on this.
It kind of sounded. He's willing to, obviously, he's willing if we want to. Pilot
Run
the
those tests at wells 4 and 5.
but he sounded
Right.
pretty discouraged and as far as there's not a whole lot going on is what I gathered. He's kind of.
Oh, just overall use of his product and everything. Good if, I don't know if you can ask him for any kind of documentation of NSF approval would be good.
I can.
Yeah, see if he could provide us with that and,
I mean, considering the issue with the PFBA breakthrough, I'd totally be in favor of spending some money on the RSSCT tests.
if that can be done with zeolite.
Right. Just to see if we can polish off right after, or,
Yep.
after the GAC, right? I mean, that could be a huge impact if it does something. I'd be happy to spend some money and try and figure that out.
Yeah,
Some of this stuff may have been done. Isn't that what they're using in Portsmouth too?
I don't know. I'm not sure about Portsmouth.
Had some kind of ion exchange resin that they were using.
Yeah, that's probably anion exchange.
Check without product, Brian gets on.
I think zeolite's a different animal, but there's a lot of private, what's the word, confidential projects that he's supposedly using it on. And when you ask him for performance and results and all that, I can't send it to you because it's confidential. Well,
Then it doesn't exist.
so I'm like, say you can redact the names of the company and all that, but still show us the data and stuff, So, yeah, I don't know if you can, maybe when you talk to him, ask him about that, if there's any other reports on performance of the data on PFAS. And he's going to tell you if it's all confidential. And say, is that possible to redact some of the confidentiality? And
Would the board be interested in having them coming into like the August meeting if there's?
I don't know.
Or
I want to see something first before,
First.
yeah, like in paper, like.
Yeah, I don't think it does any good. We don't have any
Yeah, I mean,
data.
we got the lip service before, and it all sounds great. It just, we need more than,
Yeah, we're interested
Verbal.
to show us the data.
yeah. All right, I don't really see anything else on these, probably go on to the next item, which is, old business. Do you have any old business items? No, I don't have anything.
I kind of question why we have that, since we have the action items. Isn't the action items really old business? Or shouldn't they capture all the old business?
Kind of, although I'm wondering too, I'm looking at this first amendment to the agreement with Flatley.
So if we,
Is that,
that was more to get your opinions, if you wanna, some comments as well, but we can certainly. Well, we can discuss it in old business.
so where,
Was that new business?
well, it's probably old business because we already kind of had
Yeah.
this before us
Yeah.
once, right? But what are like the big changes here? What prompted this? First of all, was this our change or was?
That
it
was
their
all my changes. He kind of took the old agreement, the old agreement and. But made it work for this one. I personally, I think it, to me, it needs to be an amendment to the original agreement, so I'm not looking at thinking I have one agreement and it's another, so it
For the different buildings and
it needs
stuff.
to go together, exactly.
Yeah.
So at the end, it's gonna be one bigger document with this amendment, and then it'll have another amendment when he goes further. And one of the big things is I wanted to make sure that the looping, it's not needed now, but I wanted to make sure that was in there to how what we have originally discussed, and it seems like it kind of keeps.
Yeah.
We'll talk about if we need it down, well, no, this is what we want. This is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
we
yeah.
need. You're fine not to do it now, but
So is this gonna be approved and sent away, or you still got more edits to make?
I've kind of gone through my edits. I probably will give it another read through to see if there's any other edits. I don't know if any of the board.
I actually didn't even have a chance to really look at this, to be honest
And
with
it
you.
doesn't have to go now, and this hasn't gone to legal yet either, so.
I was gonna ask, I'm assuming.
It's absolutely, it'll go to legal as well before it even goes back to Kevin.
All right,
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, I don't see that as a task the board should be doing, right? I mean, this is your task, no offense, right?
Yeah.
And this is legal, right?
I just want to make sure,
So, yeah, no, I appreciate that too, but
with it as well.
I appreciate
No,
it, but I
we-
mean,
I know we were questioning the original one, and I think that's why you want to just.
no, I'm
So,
and I'm not saying you shouldn't have presented that by any means, but I guess the expectation I don't have the expectation towards myself to start going over agreements like that
Right.
on a daily basis, right? So, I mean, that's what the board should trust you to work out with legal, and if there's any concerns, you bring it forth like you have before, and that's the end of it, right?
yeah, and I kind of did look at some of the highlighted text, and I didn't see anything that jumped out at me. All right, so that's good. And then we got a letter in here to the Van Wertz.
That was the letter you and I talked about, Don.
yeah.
So that was sent out.
Right. So I don't have any other old business. I know there's a lot of graphs in here of the breakthrough, charting the PFAS breaking through the different ports. Now we have wells 7 and 8 also, besides wells 4 and 5 that's being tracked and everything. So I don't think we really need to talk about a lot of this, just kind of present it for our own information.
Yep.
Any new business? Seeing none, then superintendent report.
Couple things. Actually, probably one of them should have been back with the Brandon Cannon. We're still waiting on the PFPRA.
Still waiting on that sample.
Yeah, I know Jill had reached out. So that came in shortly after our last meeting. I know Jill reached out, and I don't get any response back, but so one of the stuff we don't have any. He doesn't have it yet.
Okay,
Wednesday, we've done some stuff in the past where the town has interns working for them, and Pentachuck has a few interns with them. So we'll actually be doing some tours of the treatment plants, bring them through, and if they have questions. That's gonna be happening on Wednesday. One thing I did want to mention, and I did send out to you guys over the weekend, I think Jill forwarded up to you today, about drought. We are in a moderate drought. We're not looking bad. Some of the numbers, I did send out the
the monitoring well levels.
levels and stuff.
Looks like around well 2, there's still a lot of room there. It's probably because we haven't been using those wells until.
Yeah, it's been like up and down, but one thing Brian and I had, so Brian's been looking at it as well. And we're not, obviously we have some more rain. We want to get some additional data. We're not looking at that. We're not in bad shape for one. But now that we're getting the water levels in all of our wells. I'd like to get that, correlate that to our monitoring wells somehow, and maybe use that more of a indicator down the road, but
So the SCADA systems are, eventually our plan is to link all of our well levels into the SCADA system.
yeah, in all of our wells, well, 2 doesn't at this point. We utilize some wells outside, but all of, 4, 5, and 7 and 8 all have data loggers. I'm gonna call them data loggers. I know it's the term, but it goes down.
Divers. Right?
Divers, yeah.
Transducers. Yeah. So those are all, so we know where our well levels are at any
Exactly
time.
what our height over our screen is.
That's what we want to have.
Exactly. And there's no red flags for Brian right now. We're really in good shape, even with the ones, that we're getting into the warning level
Yeah.
and all that.
Well, actually, on the map, if you look on the very bottom of the state, it's actually extreme.
Yeah,
It's a tiny little, we're like 3%. I don't know if it goes up to Merrimack, but definitely probably.
I did look at it. It's Nashua, it's the Nashua and Massachusetts border.
So,
But I think a lot of, even the years when we had the severe drought as well, we were always in pretty good shape. But I think it's because we have those measures in place that we have the odd even. We're working.
oh, I agree. If you let people irrigate every day, our consumption would just spike.
I don't like cutting my grass all the time.
Yeah, I know.
So, I don't know.
I was earlier in this year. It was awful. It was like every 5 days when we're getting a lot of rain. Anyways, all right, is that good on the,
That's it. That's all I have.
and I don't see any MTV is on there, Merrimack TV. Yep, Amanda.
This way, maybe.
Just a quick question back to the action items. Can we scratch 62, which is to revisit and update the capital improvement plan?
What was the
Which one was it?
62.
62.
To scratch, yeah, let's go back and find it.
It's just revisit and update to CIP.
Oh, which is what we did tonight?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Probably would be nice to have a final review.
Yeah,
Fine.
okay.
yeah, it did say July meeting on there. I see that now.
well, I don't, technically, we won't have it before I have to get it into the planning board, but.
Right.
I mean. We can certainly have it, change we can make.
Maybe just,
Extend the date on that or something?
yeah, and maybe just include it in the next package. We don't maybe have to talk about it anymore.
Right.
Just for information.
So I think the CIP is gonna be refined after we review the source, the Underwood source
Yeah,
cost estimate options. But I don't know if that needs to be an action item. I think this was meant just for this meeting, right?
Yeah.
So,
if I recall.
yeah. I'm okay with taking it off there because I think we've accomplished what it was on there for.
Yep.
We're gonna go back to the CIP when we decide which alternatives we want to pursue.
Yeah. It's gonna have to change out.
So, yeah. I don't know, you guys good with that? Like, take 62 off then?
Okay.
All right, good
Thank you.
idea. All right, so I don't see any public or press. So I guess questions from the public or press. Seems like there's nobody there to ask questions. So upon that, then I'll just let everybody know the next meeting is August 16th. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Adjourn.
Seconded.
And by John, second by Ken, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
400. Thank you, and thanks Merrimack TV, and we'll see you at the next meeting.